going live. Well, greetings everybody, and welcome to yet another edition of the Inworld Review. Believe it or not, we are in the new year, so happy new year to all of you. We said it last week, but now that great famous midnight bell has chimed several days ago, in fact, and we're thoroughly in the new year. And we're 5 days in, I do believe. He says, trying to check his thingy. Yes, we are the 5th of January already. Bright new year, lots to look forward and lots to look back on. And this, in some ways, is the second of our two midwinter shows where we are looking forward and looking back. A lot of changes are going to be in store here, the detail of which won't be too noticeable immediately, so we'll come to those later. I also found out this morning that some other major changes are happening where broadcasting and stuff is concerned in World, and we will be bringing you news of that at a future point too. I'm sure some of it is good news and some of it is bad news, but we'll save the detail to more thoroughly into the new year. Reflecting on real life, rather quickly, Britain here, where I am, as you may know, has been subject to some rather amazing storms recently. And in fact, shortly before we came on air, the wind and the rain that I heard outside the window here did actually stop. So maybe it's going to be quiet while we do this show. I don't know. Also, of course, towards the East Coast and Central America, there have been, like the center of America, as opposed to Central America, if I've got that right, are also having very severe storms. And I gather way sub-zero in places like Chicago. I don't really know the details of this. So anyway, it's not good. And unfortunately, as far as our guests are concerned today, we were going to have Maria Korolov, or we were hoping to, but she's won't be home for 2 hours, so can't join us. So there goes our hypergrid reflections. And yeah, there are a couple of other people who are somewhat ill, unfortunately, as well as having the weather on their hands. They're feeling rather ill too. For one reason or another. We do, however, have a couple of great guests with us, so no problems there. We'll still find umpteen things to talk about, as indeed we always do. In the absence of Maria, I'll just start with a few sort of OpenSim hypergrid-based news updates, reading quite literally from Maria's blog, which of course is www.hypergridbusiness.com. The sad news is there's a relatively small sim on the Open Simulator Network called Haven is actually closing, or in fact has closed. It closed on the 27th, so that's gone by already. But no sooner has one closed than another one, now potentially quite a big one, has opened. It's founded by a chap called Roddy Machi, and it's the Great Canada Grid. Yes, an attempt to make a Canadian-specific grid. And one of the beauties of OpenSim is that, like Franco Grid, which is a French grid, has been very successful. And I see no reason why any other sort of territorial-type grids, which provide a home grid for the residents of one nationality, shouldn't be equally successful, especially with a hypergrid where you can simply teleport to another grid if you need to, unlike the closed world of Second Life. So the Great Canada Grid has opened. Currently, it's still in beta, but it is online and you can register. So, some people say Second Life's still in beta, and they may very well have a point. Another grid has opened called Camelot Kingdom. They're hypergrid enabled, and they held yesterday, in fact, a grand opening party. I don't know how the party went, but they're well and truly away there. Another grid called Another World, the grid is actually called Another World, are apparently going to, if you want to join up as a new paying resident, you stand a chance of getting into a lottery, and winning 1,000 USA dollars. Some lucky new resident joining that grid will get a payback, a special gift of $1,000 US, and yes, the premium membership is actually only £5 per month, and you can rent homestead regions with 12,000 prims. That's quite a lot of prims for £30 a month. I imagine there's various options there, but joining up as a paying customer will qualify you for that, go into the pot for that prize, so to speak. Tropical Island, another grid, are holding 2-for-1 land sale that's going to continue to the end of January. So if you're looking for land on the hypergrid and want to check them out, you can basically you get like 24,000. I guess that's 24,000 prim region for $60 a month, but you'll get a second region absolutely free in that price for the time being. And let's see. OpenSync Creations is a very popular portal to go to for downloading freebies and I think some paying stuff for use in OpenSim. It's like a marketplace for OpenSim. And they are now hosting Linda Kelly's items, which have formerly been very popular all over the place, and items available from a vendor called Arcadia Asylum. And all that started on January the 1st. And as far as there are a lot of free items there, as there are throughout OpenSim, but of the paying items there, 10% of the proceeds on all items sold via OpenSim Creations are actually go towards funding OpenSim development, which is a nice thing, so to speak. Right, I'm just getting little urgent messages in Skype here, so no, nothing important. One of the bigger grids called Virtual Highway has reported a very successful 2013. I won't go into the details on all that. And I've lost my scroll bar, so I'm scrolling down here. Oh yes, and Kitely. Well, we already knew they'd announced new pricing plans, but those have now been made a lot clearer, and they're up on Kitely's site. Apparently, there are basically 3 different packages that you can use to sign up with Kitely. And the price is determined by the number of visitors you will have and the space you use and everything else like that. So one of the latter day, there are quite a lot of those online companies now that will host OpenSims for you, and one of the more recent entries in the market is a company called ZetaMex, who I've been sort of keeping an eye on. Now, they've actually announced an award for anyone who finishes up work on the Mumble Whisper open source voice system for OpenSim. Mumble Whisper is effectively an independently run voice system, rather like Vvox in Second Life. Vvox is generally available to use on OpenSim for non-profit sims and people who can't afford to pay. But some of the more commercial sims would actually have to pay for a Vvox license, and I think the Whisper is often promoted as an alternative to Vvox, considerably cheaper than a Vvox license. It's one of these dodgy areas where Vvox are actually very generous, but once you do qualify for having to pay them, they do actually charge quite a lot from that point on. So that's of interest. And of course, without Maria, I was hopefully going to get a look back on 2014 on the hypergrid, but we haven't really got one here. I am actually, I have a feeling Tara may have more to say about this, so I'm going to leave this for a while, but I do actually have a blog up that I just picked up yesterday, I think it was, from Inara Pei, Living in the Modern World, where she talks about a new release candidate called the Package Fix Viewer and various other things. And I don't know, Tara, I know you followed that blog, so you may have something to say on that. But otherwise, I think that's really it for a general summary of the Open Metaverse, so to speak. So I'll hand over to Tara for her latest roundup. Welcome, Tara.
Thank you, Mal. And greetings, everyone. And for those of you who are in the U.S., in most of the U.S., and either in the midst of bitterly cold weather or are looking down the gun barrel at what is on its way in from the Arctic, you have my sympathies. It doesn't sound like it's going to be a whole lot of fun in a goodly portion of the country as far as sub-zero Fahrenheit temperatures and wind chills that boggle my mind to even contemplate. and 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 I won't tell you that here in the Pacific Northwest we have sunshine and it's well above freezing today. And there's none of that Arctic stuff headed our way, at least for now. So I'm glad about that. Anyhow, in the news front, Mal, I think I'll just start in on what you just mentioned, which was Inara's summary of release candidate releases and various things from the lab, which is now back in gear. Although it's obvious that the destination guide and the viewer isn't quite getting the updates in a timely fashion that it should be, because I noticed this morning that there were several items listed as destinations, which were destinations until the end of December, uh, which is now past. So
I think your expression "back in gear" is rather relative when it comes to
oh
Linda
yes,
Lab.
yes. I think back in gear really kicks in tomorrow. Lots of people took advantage of the timing of holidays, I think, this year to take extra time off. And yes, the flu bug is making its rounds, and of course you get kids back in school, and it really gets going with a vengeance. So it's not too surprising that some folks are out sick at the moment. Anyhow, yeah, there's a couple of actually two project viewers that are kind of interest. Now, one of these is this first one, the one that Mel mentioned, the package fix viewer. This one is definitely in the eat your vegetables, highly geeky category. This is a new release candidate. It's an update that fixes an issue introduced um, with 3.6.12 code base that Windows the Windows executable name changed from Second Life to Second Life Viewer. And what this meant or means is that there's some stuff that is still looking for the old shortcuts, and then isn't finding them, and is finding the old versions rather than the new versions, which it will then run the old version, which will trigger a further auto update and endlessly like that. So this is supposed to fix any executables using the old name. Um, so any shortcuts created with the old name will cause Windows to display an error message. Isn't that helpful? And then you can then remove them or modify them to point to the correct executable. Of course, now as soon as you say executable to a lot of folks, they glaze over. And so I would fervently hope whatever this accomplishes, that they roll it into the main viewer, the main Second Life viewer, ASAP, and they do it in a way that doesn't require users to understand what to do to modify an error message about an executable, which sounds really scary, I think, to most folks. So I'll leave that as it is. The second one I think is more interesting. I'm not sure that this has actually been released as a release candidate yet, but it's very soon. It's Monty Linden's long-awaited HTTP project viewer. It surfaced on Friday from QA. It's part of their ongoing HTTP project work, and has three main updates: an experimental fix for long-standing DNS problems. The DNS is used to get at information, and the mechanism used to perform DNS lookups has been changed from an application-hosted DNS resolver to a combination of threads and host operating systems resolver. Basically, that's a more robust system, so that's good. And improvements to mesh downloads with better connection behavior is a piece of this. So we can hope that the length of time it takes to, for things to go from weird looking spheres to actual objects will decrease. And there's a second piece of that about reliability improvements, that the combination of the two, I think we can look forward to seeing much quicker, cleaner mesh downloads and resolves as far as what we see in our viewers. And there's been a release. There's apparently a merchant outbox project viewer, which is, I would suspect, only of particular interest to merchants. But there's a new a new version of that out as of last Thursday, and it includes fixes for accurately detecting merchant status and improves recovery for merchant outbox errors. So that should be good for those who are merchants and using that particular viewer. I'm sure we'll see lots more coming out of the lab here this coming week and weeks following as they continue to roll out new stuff. We have their teaser from just before Christmas that that we should see surfacing soon. Viewers to allow viewers that handle yes, the Oculus Rift, and also they made comments about mobile based Second Life access, and I believe it was Daniel who has been testing one for some time, has been part of the beta group on that. So we'll wait and see what all those look like, but I think we'll see those fairly soon. Yeah. And apropos the Oculus Rift comment, Hamlet in a post this week in his blog is waxing poetic, is still waxing poetic about the Oculus Rift, and let it be and let it be known that he knows things because he's been involved in some of what's been going on behind the scenes, which of course explains some of his enthusiasm. So I think we'll just have to wait and see. I definitely am of the general opinion that I think there's an awful lot of hype cycle operating when it comes to the Oculus Rift. But we'll see how that all plays out. You know, it's the Oculus Rift is not going to be ready for prime time and commercial sales for probably at least another 9 months, as I understand it. I think it's going to have to go through some pretty hefty changes, especially on things like how heavy and awkward it is to put on your head. So wait and see on that. So. But I was in a way I was not too surprised to see Hamlet's comment that he's has some back end involvement in that, and basically he said he'll have things to say but not yet. So another little interesting announcement in the bug department: if you use Gmail and have set your Second Life preferences to deliver your IMs to email while you're off world, and you've noticed a drop in communications, there's a reason. Google now places IMs and emails coming from im.agni.linenlab.com into your spam folder. Thank goodness for PrimPerfect, which caught up with this, and in their most recent post, this was earlier this week, has outlined some easy and clear steps to fix it. So if you use a Gmail account for your Second Life out-of-world communications of forwards of email of IMs and messages, visit PrimPerfect's blog to get the details on how to short circuit Gmail's infinite wisdom on how you want things spam filtered. Okay, let's see. We cover that. Oh, I was going to comment, Mal, you said a little bit about the changes in Kitely's pricing structure. I guess I followed up a little bit on that, and there's what was announced here, I guess just a few days ago, was some additional details, particularly on fixed price options, which they've changed the structure on. And there's an interesting little detail that NRPay covered, is that you've got two different kinds of accounts. You can have a regular account, which is free, or a premium account, which there's a monthly fee for. And with a regular account, you have a certain number of hours initially for a trial period. But after that, if you're visiting a metered environment, whoever's SIM that is being charged. for your time in their sim if you're a regular if you have a regular account with Kitely. And one of the changes apparently is that people who have metered sims can now block them to regular users. So if you only have a free account in Kitely and you find you can't get into a sim, that may be the reason. It's a metered sim and the owner doesn't feel like they want to be working out for stray visitors, and be warned. Anyhow, the rest of this is a little beyond me. I haven't really. I figure Kitely is one of those places I really need to put on my one of these days. I need to go visit and check it out and all that, because they're certainly doing some things right, I think, and they certainly aren't going away anytime soon. The other thing that caught my attention this week, well, one of several things actually, was a number of things going on around the LEA Sims, which of course we talk about the LEA Sims, the Lennon Endowment for the Arts Sims, pretty regularly. But there's a couple of short-term opportunities here. The Moving Islands Sim, a Moving Islands project, which is LEA 20, is inviting folks to submit entries into basically to create a story around the In the Belly of the Whale exhibit. And their instructions are: reflect on the topic In the Belly of the Whale. Reflect harder. Now do us a film, a picture, or a photo story at LEA 20. Wear your own builds or use existing ones from the sim. Create a short photo story or a 120-minute epic film. Sing, shout, or shoot a harpoon into the last whale. Perhaps you may decide to feel like being in any special kind of belly, or to produce your work in that special cadaver exquisite look. Special Russian dictator bellies floating through your mind? Now you are ready to go. Give us the honor and donate a work to our interactive extravaganza. That promo description is worthy of a visit all by itself. So that doesn't pique your interest, read it again and go check it out. That's LEA 20. The Secret Rage has organized a flash mob set up on LEA 26 and 27th for people to submit artwork to be shown in those two regions through the end of January. It's one or two artworks. These can be flat or 3D. It's up to you what you submit, and are being put up pretty much as they come in until they run out of prims. So that should be pretty fun for a highly eclectic assortment. And there's a whole bunch of stuff in the way of short-term projects are occurring across LEA regions through the end of January. And I was very interested to notice that our very own Petlove Petshop has a sim,
Busted.
as does
Busted.
MOY, who also is around this show. So Petlove Sim is LEA 23. There you go, Petlove.
Thanks, Sarah.
And MO Sim is LEA 24. So go visit.
Yeah. And visit frequently, and also, because they're never going to be done.
Yeah, okay.
An ongoing process.
Ongoing.
Yes, also a longtime friend of the show, Korkozman Boom, who's a longtime Chilboite too, is in this assortment with LEA 17. So we've got to check out stuff.
Oh boy, yeah.
Yeah.
Korkozman's actually in the channel chat room too. It's a nice one.
Oh, is he? Is he?
Yes.
There? Oh, yeah, I see he is there today. So yes, Korkoz, there's your plug. So.
Oh my God, my secret is out, he says.
I can't keep things secret from us for very long.
Too.
Okay, and my very last little note here. A couple of weeks ago, I gave you the cleaned up version of a quick visit to Stroker's Toys Sim, and events going on there. Well, the Panty Raid hunt is now underway and runs until the 15th. And if you want details, you can go to strokerstoys.com, and that's Strokers, STROKERZ, TOYZ.com, and you can get the details. Obviously, you have to be able to get into the adult rated Sims in order to visit this in Stroker's Toys Sim.
Apparently, yeah, I've been reading some of the blogs on that, and it's not the sort of first thing I would jump to go and visit, really. But apparently, the quality, it's the quality of all the prizes in this are really high. A lot of people are raving about the quality of the prizes. So,
Yeah, well,
yeah,
that's good to hear. Yeah.
Mm.
Well, I just, I'm finding it amusing. It's a great name for a,
yeah,
for a hunt.
yeah. Of course, I don't know what the prizes are.
Yeah. If either or both of us goes and hunts on that one, we'll probably be selective about what we might share on the show later.
Indeed.
But you have until the 15th, so you've got about a week. You've got 10 days to get in there if you want to participate. And it's the sim, by the way, is clothing optional.
Oh yes, yes.
So if you've always wanted to take your avatar out in the all together, this is your chance. And on that note, it's back to you, Mel.
Oh, right. Okay. I mean, just when the popping noise is coming on, I think that's the reminder. It's back to me. Okay. Well, that is great stuff. I actually, well, I think Perfect they came up with a guide to the Gmail issue. I think it was actually raised previously by somebody else. I haven't actually suffered from this at all. It's the first thing I went to do is to check, and my alt uses Gmail as his registered address, and I seem to be getting things through normally. But if I did check my spam folder, it's usually a matter of just checking one and marking it as not spam. And Gmail normally appreciates that address is no longer spam thereafter. Yeah, anyway, so interesting stuff. Now, I'm not sure whether I announced this last week. We have Daniel Voyager in the chat room on our live channel. So hi there, Dan. Dan, of course, is one of the best news sources, his blog at danielvoyager.wordpress.com when it comes to both Second Life and OpenSim, equal spread of news here. And he actually posted on the 29th of December, which I think was the same day we would have been live last week, so maybe I didn't mention it. But, pardon me. He also actually has a post on 29 saying OpenSim most memorable events and new records for 19, here we go again, 2013. And he basically goes through month by month listing various highlights that happened over on the OpenSim grids and the hypergrid, of course, during the year. So do check that out for a nice little resume, as it were. So I do have various links for Second Life and elsewhere that we'll discuss as we go along, including a couple of times I mentioned. But I think it's about time we brought on the guests we have with us today. Now, you've heard her voice already. So first off, I'll introduce our erstwhile camera woman, who, by the way, this will be her last regular show for us today. So I'd really like to say thank you right now for all the hard work she's put in over nearly a year. And it's Petlove Petshop. Hi, Pet.
Hi, Mal. Thank you. I apologize for my lips not moving because I got in the chair at the very, very last minute.
And all of a sudden, yes, we know that story. We all had that before we came on. We had to rapidly fix it to get in the rhythm of things. And you have a sim at LEA, and I didn't even know this, so congrats on that as well.
Thank you. It's a lot of fun. It's just so much fun to have all those prims and to be able to terraform it any way you want to.
Ooh, yes. You wouldn't. Taro will tell you that people like me are not let near terraform buttons.
I love to terraform.
Yes.
Yeah.
I like the idea of it, but things tend to go a bit wrong very rapidly.
It takes practice, It's not a simple thing, terraforming. You have to really get a feel for it.
Yeah,
it's true.
Altering the brush strokes and putting things up, and without disrupting what you've already got, I think is a real problem.
Right.
Terraforming is best done before anything else.
Oh, God.
Not that I've already got my sim. Yes, exactly. Anyhow, thanks, Pet. We're also joined, first time for quite a while actually, by Phelan Corrimal. also known as Kevin Phelan. He's from Rockcliffe University in Second Life, and of course, he's the sort of the guiding light, I think you might say, behind Virtual World's best practices in education, which will be happening again this year. So, welcome, Phelan.
Thank you very much.
And finally, I did mention earlier that everybody was sort of a bit poorly and couldn't get here this week. Well, I'm really grateful to Debs Regent for popping in because she is a bit poorly, but sort of said she'd come and help out anyway. So welcome, Debs.
Oh, it's a pleasure. Thank you for having me on. It's lovely, as always, to come and see everybody.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
And Debs, of course, is the one behind Virtual London, basically in Second Life, but also, as we'll no doubt discuss, on OpenSim and various other places too. Virtual London is spreading its wings, so to speak. Yeah, we all know London doesn't fly, but sure, it sort of does in this case, I have to admit. So, one of my main focuses, on this show, I think, is to, just engage in a loose conversation, looking back at the year gone by and the year coming up. And I think it'd be good to start with you, Phelan, because we did actually mention last week that, one of the major events amongst the sort of cycle of major events that happens almost every year in Second Life and in possibly elsewhere, of course, is the huge educational conference you run, Virtual World's Best Practices in Education. Yeah, a bit long, but VWBPE, as it is sometimes referred to. And of course, I'm not sure we've had you on this show or anywhere else since last year's event. So maybe you'd like to tell us how last year's event went and what sort of what great things have been happening in the educational communities over the last year.
Well, last year was actually kind of interesting because for a number of different reasons, we chose to move the conference from essentially the week of St. Patrick's Day to the middle of July, and that was a little bit of an experiment. I mean, every year we try to do something a little bit different. I mean, the whole point of the conference is an evolution in terms of where we're going, and so we started to do a number of different things with the conference last year. So one of which was to introduce multiple virtual worlds. We moved the date of the conference. We moved the format around a little bit, and a couple of those things worked out really well, and a couple of things didn't work out quite as well as we had hoped. So moving the date actually wasn't probably as smart an idea as what we thought it was going to be.
Oh dear. Okay.
Right, and part of the logic was that we kept hearing from people. So we'd get people that would go to ISTE's conference because ISTE's got a huge conference in June, right? And yet time after time we'd hear the same thing. People would go to ISTE, they'd hear about Virtual Worlds, which had just finished, and then they would say, well, how come I didn't hear about it? Notwithstanding all the advertising and publicity that we've got out there about the conference. So we figured, okay, well, why don't we try to put it after ISTE's conference? And then all those people that hear about the conference can then go. And it didn't quite work out that way. So we kind of figured that we want to move it back to where we had traditionally had it. We're not quite looking at the middle of March anymore because, as soon as you start dealing with anything in the middle of the school year, people are going to find reasons why it's not the correct week to have it. Right. So it's March break for one, it's not March break for the other. It's too close to exams, it's too far from exams. It's
so you've announced April 9th, 10th, 11th, 12th, haven't you? So that presumably is the holiday, is this?
No, it's actually not. We actually deliberately wanted to stay away from Easter. We didn't want to do right after Easter because we figured that nobody would show up to help set everything up.
Right.
And we didn't want to do it the weekend of Easter because that was just, to me, that would just be wrong, right? So we decided to do it a couple of weeks in advance. So I believe Easter's the weekend of the 20th, I think. April 20th that year. So, but I mean, we're playing around with this idea of the beginning of April now instead of the beginning of March, just because it seems to be a little bit more. It gives us a little bit more room at the beginning of the year, and it's not so far close to the end of the year where it's going to interfere with teachers and educators having their exam schedules come up.
And of course, April 9th is not April 1st, so you're on
It's not
safe
April
ground.
1st. No, stay away from that one. That's
Great.
when all the government, but April 1st is when all the government budgets come out. So, you know, we wouldn't want to take away from their glory when they start to do those things.
Now, one of the things that happened last year, I mean, apart from multiple grids, and of course we were broadcasting it, so we were fairly hands-on with all this, is that for the first time, you took a lot of the workshops and I guess the MOOCs, as they call them, the online courses, and you followed through after the conference was over with a lot of these projects and workshops, didn't you, rather than include them in the conference? How did that work out?
It was actually the second time that we had done that. So 2 years ago, when Kayvon was running the programs, was our programs chair, her and Abacus, who were sort of co-chairing that particular group, they had decided that they wanted to put this MOOC on. And while it was primarily sort of being done more under the auspices of the Front Range Community College, the fact of the matter was, I mean, we started to look at what was happening as part of that, and what we found was that it actually worked out really, really well. They got a really good response to running a MOOC for a couple of weeks after the conference, and so we decided to try it again last year. And for 2 years in a row, what we found is that this actually works really, really well. One of the things that we had always had a challenge with as part of the conference was this idea that we wanted to do virtual world tours where, the conference itself has 1, 2, 3 venues that are our primary venues for all the lecture and the discussion components. But then you really want to be able to showcase things like Kitely. You want to showcase things like, I don't know if Blue Mars is still up and running, but I mean, you've got Club Penguin, you've got Minecraft, you've got EVE Online, you've got World of Warcraft, you've got people doing different things with Unity. You've got all these different things that are out there. And to try to, even to try to squeeze a presentation or an actual tour to one of these particular places into an hour and a half time slot, it really doesn't do it justice. So what we had decided was, okay, let's make this formally part of the conference, and we'll extend the conference by a couple of weeks to put this MOOC component into what it is that we're doing, and we'll move all the virtual world tours to that particular section. And that's exactly what we've done. And, last year it worked out great. The year before it worked out great. We're expecting the same thing. The nice thing about this is that we're under we're no longer under a time constraint. So if somebody like Spot on 3D, for example, wants to come along and do a 3-hour session, which shows all the different bits and pieces in terms of what they're doing, which is different from, Inworlds and Kitely and whoever else. They have the time that they can actually, people can spend the appropriate amount of time to go get an account, to get the software, get set up. They can then take their time getting into the world, and they can actually ask all the questions that they really want to ask about those particular types of things.
Yeah. In Spot On's case, it's actually quite difficult to double process, I think, setting up the account. So it does make sense that people have time to prepare.
Yeah, but I mean, even if you look at things like if you want to do something with Club Penguin, World of Warcraft, it's a number of these things where you've got components that need to be. Well, sorry, Club Penguin doesn't fit in that category, but I mean, EVE Online. I mean, things where you've got these gigabytes of files that you have to download onto your computer. I mean, you're not going to do that 5 minutes before the session starts.
Exactly. Right? It's not a quick hypergrid jump, in other words.
For some of them, it's not. Yeah, and whereas others are, others might take another. It might take a half an hour to get an account set up.
I have a
Right.
feeling that actually one of the more popular sessions amongst those we filmed last year was actually the one where we literally hypergrid jumped into Jacadia and filmed a program that was actually about Minecraft. So it was an odd mix, you know, you were going into an open sim grid, but the actual session was about another platform completely, and of course Minecraft. I never initially thought of it as a virtual world. I thought of it as just like an advanced Lego kit. But of course, it's all a matter of scaling. You know, if you start thinking of Lego blocks as pixels and go big, you can do a hell of a lot. And of course, this has really taken off with the educational community, hasn't it?
Oh,
Um, in a
it
big
it
way.
it, it has. I mean, I mean, this is sort of the thing about virtual worlds is that you know the one thing that I keep telling people about virtual worlds is this idea that there's this concept of presence that
Mm,
you don't get it by standing behind somebody watching somebody play on the computer inside one of these virtual worlds. When we talk about learning inside these virtual worlds, there's a tacit aspect to the learning environment that really has to do with this idea of a sense of presence.
yeah.
And there was a professor, and I, for the life of me, I wish I could remember his name, but in one of the early V2B BBE conferences, we had a professor from the University of Hawaii that had come in, and he was presenting research about this idea that all reality is virtual. And when you sit down in front of something like Second Life, or when you sit down in front of these other types of like Minecraft and these types of things, the mind, once you're engaged with the environment, doesn't distinguish
Mm,
between that virtual pixels cartoons on a screen type of thing and going outside to play. To the
yeah.
mind, it's all the same thing. So you bring this concept of presence to the learning environment, which really sort of taps into some of the things that I'm very much interested in terms of my research, which is this
Mm,
idea of a social component to knowledge and how knowledge emerges as part of our societies.
mm,
And that, if you don't have that social component, right, that the efficiency of learning actually decreases.
mm.
Right. So, this is one of the things that we've been finding time and time and time again is that, yeah, you could use WebEx in order to give somebody a presentation. But the
Mm.
reason why it's more effective in Second Life, even though we have all these hoops we have to jump through to do a presentation in here, is simply because the technology is not a barrier to this concept of presence.
Absolutely. I mean, I think it was Christian Renaud went back when he was at Cisco who delivered a speech that was really convincing. And, you know, the word presence is sort of just stuck in my brain because that summarizes it. And what I found interesting about the session on Dragadia which okay, in fact, wasn't it? Was that many of the kids she brought in, which was great, you know, the actual students, had actually, learned these skills in Minecraft, possibly because of its simplicity and the fact it has a community and you can have classrooms in there. But they had come into it wasn't Second Life, but Tracadia is very similar in function to Second Life, and of course they were introduced to all these new skills like mangling prims and stuff like that, and they were getting equally excited by this new prim method, shall we say, of building and creating things. So it was almost as if Minecraft had been I don't want to classify it as this, but it was almost as if the Minecraft had been the elementary school and then suddenly been thrust into secondary school, seeing all these new things that they could do with the same sense of presence and maybe slightly different tools. So I just found it fascinating. It had been a kind of introductory curve for a number of the kids that came in.
It is
Mm,
where the theme that we're actually using for this year's conference is this idea of connections, and which it was something that sort of came out of a couple of ideas that were expressed last year. But I mean, this whole idea that as you're working with inside these virtual environments, you're making connections on so many different levels. And what I'm hoping is that the education community is going to pick up on this theme and start, really start of delving into some of these ideas in terms of how the education system and how we develop educational curriculum and programs that sort of focus on this social aspect of well, sorry, not just the social aspect, but I mean certainly social aspect is a large part of it, but the social aspect of how this idea of presence really does sort of augment the learning experience. But I mean, even beyond that, and it's unfortunate because on our website we actually found a copy of a YouTube video of James Burke's Connection series, where he talks about this idea of technology traps. And even though that program was created like in the end of the 1970s, it is still so relevant today. Unfortunately, YouTube took it down, so we're trying to get another link that we found to it back up. So if we can get that up there, it's tomorrow. We're hoping that will be available. But it's really interesting because I mean, when you look at innovation, when you look at knowledge, when you look at how we learn and how we develop and how we create sort of like the reality around us, whether it's virtual or physical, it's most of this isn't about spontaneously popping a new idea into existence that was never there before. I mean, a lot of this is really the idea of taking things that are already there and combining them in new ways. And this idea of knowledge, ideas, innovation is really born out of the idea of people being able to make these connections, make connections between social, make connections between ideologies, make connections between various bits and pieces of knowledge, such that it doesn't travel in a linear type fashion. And I'm really sort of hoping that we're going to get some really good presentations that will sort of pick up on this theme this year.
Without going into a major diversion, regarding the MOOCs and things like that, actually, I know you're of course in Canada, not the USA, but you're near enough by, you're next door, so to speak.
No kidding, eh?
I have been getting the impression, and do tell me if I'm wrong here, but in terms of curriculum and stuff, it does seem to me that there's some skepticism on the part of the US government as to the use of the MOOCs and things as a method of education. I believe there was sort of some interest, and then they've got more skeptical about kind of endorsing it. Do you have any worries or optimism and feedback on that?
I don't. So I'm not really sure about what the exact article is that you're referring to. So I will fully admit to not having read that, but I would imagine that any criticism of the idea of the concept of a MOOC really has to do more with the idea of assessment than it does in terms of the way information is actually being presented. And that's, assessment is always the challenge, because the way we have our society built, it's if you apply for a job, right, the first thing they ask you is, well, what school did you go to? Right? Even though they don't really care what school you go to, the first thing they want to know is, did you go to school? Do you have a master's? Do you have a bachelor's? Do you have an associate degree? I mean, what type of learning do you have? And can we trust that the institution that you went to is one that follows an accredited process? So, if
do you think we're moving? I kind of hope we are, but I've got connections with education, but I'm not well, I've been a trainer, but that's more corporate than the educational system. Do you think, you talk about assessment, and I better not go too far off on this, but to me, I think the nature of learning these days, given the amount of information available to us and the research we can do and whatever, I think the traditional idea of curriculums where it's like being fixed by textbooks, you learn this language, you learn this portion of history, and the exams are set relative to those tasks. I get the feeling that the educational system should and maybe is moving more to one of where the assessment is not based on specific knowledge that somebody has to research, but their ability to retain and analyze information that they sort of collect themselves. I'd much rather somebody is measured on their intelligent abilities to collect, analyze information, and acquire knowledge that they can put to use, rather than the old system of require this block of knowledge that everybody in a given year maybe also has to get. And I'm just wondering, with the opening up of what is possible creatively and participatory on the web and certainly in virtual worlds, whether there has to be a new definition of assessment.
Well, actually, it's interesting because that's sort of where we're going with it's not sort of, this is where we're going with Rockcliffe. I mean, the whole idea that the nature of, how we develop knowledge, how we express knowledge, how we work with it, so, knowledge can be a very, if you think about it in terms of potential and kinetic energy, knowledge is by itself just potential, it's potential energy waiting to be released into something productive. And unfortunately, the way most colleges and universities are structured is that their whole basis for existence is to measure individuals' potential energy, right? Their potential knowledge base and how it may be applied. And the real test of whether or not somebody has really learned that is they go out into the marketplace, they get themselves a job, and if they can keep the job, then obviously they know something about what it is that they're doing.
Exactly.
And I hate to sound very cruel about that, but I mean, it's really, education gives you a running start to get into, hopefully a field that you love, and to be able to build a career out of it, and then to continue the process of developing knowledge as you move forward. I mean, we have to become lifelong learners. I think what one of the things that we're really seeing, and what virtual environments are really sort of highlighting to a certain extent, is this idea that knowledge and information is not something that you're going to gain in all cases by sitting inside a classroom for 3 to 4 years. And then all of a sudden you come out from that and, ooh, look, I'm intelligent. It's, from my point of view, it's like, oh, look, you can pass the test, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Whether you're knowledgeable or not, I have met so many people that don't have degrees that can blow people who have degrees out of the water. At the same time, I have met so many people who have degrees that are so, smart and intelligent and so up there that, I mean, you can't help but just, stare in awe at some of these people. So, I mean, there's examples both ways in terms of the value and the misrepresentation of that value by going and taking a formalized program. I think one of the things that's actually more important, and this is just the way our society, our global society has been developing, is this concept that I've been trying to put forward of just-in-time learning, where, the nature of the types of decisions that we need to make on an ongoing basis once you're into the workforce is a question of, here it is, I've got a problem, and I can't wait 4 years to go take a class on this in order to solve the problem. If I don't solve the problem in the next 3 weeks, right, my company could go bankrupt, right? Or right, or something else, might happen, right? I mean, that's probably, a worst case scenario. But, these are the types of things that are happening because everybody else around you is moving so fast compared to where you are at that particular point in time, that if you can't keep up with the pace at which innovation and information and knowledge is being developed around you, that eventually you get left behind. So can universities and colleges really adapt to that particular type of model? Some of them are showing they can, but I don't think that's necessarily in the assessment area of those particular things. I think the assessment area, and this is where we're seeing things like MIT's OpenCourseWare, and I think Berkeley's got an OpenCourseWare library as well. I mean, they're basically saying, look, the competitive advantage of coming to a university is not the static information that we put onto a page. The competitive advantage is the fact that we have professors that know what the heck that it is that they're doing, and that we have an assessment mechanism that really tries to get down to the core of, do you really understand what's going on? And so, is it morphing? I think it is, but I don't think it's morphing to that same extent where the rest of us as a society are really going to.
Okay, this I suddenly thought back of to what Tara was saying earlier about the Oculus Rift and how it needs to improve, and it's going through a hype cycle. One of the interesting things actually about this so-called hype cycle is that however it pans out, and I agree with Tara, I think Oculus Rift is just one part of the equation, but it does seem to be helping, and intentionally so, helping with the idea of promoting virtual worlds. I mean, people say you can use it for games and virtual worlds and stuff, but they are sort of promoting it as a multifunctional interface, and obviously virtual worlds as well as games are a primary target. But I'd like to bring Debs into this conversation because, of course, like your conference, Virtual London, as it were, has been exploring various different platforms. It has a presence on a number of them. And just before I do, I've been reading the chat room in the channel. We incidentally, Daniel Voyager has just announced that he's posted a new post at danielvoyagerwordpress.com, which right on topic, I might say at the moment. The title of the post is Prediction Size of OpenSim and Second Life in the coming year, 2014. And he also sees, I haven't followed it because it's on the other machine, but there seems to be a link to some other article that sounds vaguely familiar. So if I think, Debs, you might have been reading a couple of those items. Yeah. Looking back on the year, Debs, you too, just as Phelan's conference has been exploring OpenSim and various other places, you too, I know we discussed this before, have been expanding out of just Second Life into other platforms. Maybe you'd like to give us a sort of summary on that, and feel free to anything you've been pulling up from those links. You care to mention it as well.
It's fascinating. I've been following what Phelan said with absolute, riveted fascination. I've had a back chat with a few people, and they also have. So it's really nice to hear him. And if we're talking about going backwards, I remember Best Practice in Education, 2007, I think it was when we first we presented London in that event. I don't know if Phelan will remember that, but. Yeah, it's quite a while ago.
That was the very first one, actually. That was done by.
That was the very first one.
That was Philippe and Veritas, and there were four, I think 3 or 4 other ladies that had run it for the. That was the very first time that they did it, and it was a 24-hour conference, and it was amazing, in terms of the just the dynamic that was going on as part of that conference. It was just wonderful.
It was great. It was great participation, and it was nice to see people working together. You said to me, you've just said that people with degrees and high degrees and professors and people who haven't got any qualifications at all, it was amazing to see the meeting of minds from people from various different educational backgrounds who were all interested in what I have been taught to call lifelong learning. And it looks like places like MIT and Stanford and that are sort of supporting that kind of thing. And we're sort of keen to work with London to support that and to explore ourselves. We're all learning. So we're all bringing things in. We're all sort of learning new things about other people, about how, and actually, one thing that I've been learning is about how virtual teams work. It's very, very different. Very, very different from the traditional sort of physical-based team where you've got 4 guys in or 5 guys in an office, and 5 guys could be furries, they could be whatever. But traditionally, you've got the people in the office, they sit, they do their work. But here, you have to work in a different way. You have to negotiate how you work with people, and what you said stands very true. When you mentioned the concept of presence, I mean, I don't know if you know, my background is actually in psychology, so obviously that rang a very, very strong bell with me, because obviously it's all about what we think we are, rather than what is physically around us, and it's very difficult also to get grounded. What I say When I say that, I mean when you're in a virtual world, you're in it. You're not sort of sitting at your seat looking at a keyboard. Not mentally, you're not. You're actually participating with this other group, and we find that with London, we sort of had lots of participants throughout the years. People have changed. People have come and gone. We've had people who have stayed throughout the time, which is incredible. And it's just fantastic to see the way people work together and how it enables growth.
Your colleague Quamio, who I haven't seen for quite some time, is on the channel here saying, aptly saying there are no longer any boundaries between pupil and tutor.
Absolutely. And that makes sense because each one is learning, and you can learn off your pupils. I mean, you can do anywhere in a classroom, but you can learn off your pupils in in a virtual environment. And we've been basically relearning and relearning in London. People have been learning from that. A mentor has taught somebody something, and then the mentee has then been teaching the mentor, and it's like more like people climbing up rungs in a ladder than anything else. And so we're growing, we're exploring, we're expanding. We've got I think we've got about 8 builders currently in Avenation building. We've got some other business projects going on that I'm afraid I can't talk about, which is a bit of annoying. But and we've looked at the open sim side of it. We've actually got a couple of private open sims. We've been working on Sim on a Stick. We've had a look at Kitely. So there's London projects all over the place, and it's all sort of brand London. It's kind of how we're doing it, because it's it's something that everybody's come to know.
You mentioned presence and the way teams work together. Do you find, even though you are a strictly London project per se, in terms of the, you're presenting London online,
Yes.
do you actually find there's a heavy involvement of in the teams from people who don't necessarily live in London? Yeah, people who are just fascinated by it or whatever, and work as part of the teams. In other words, does your team workers have that global reach as well?
Exactly. The team is totally global. I mean, we have people who are, almost like shift work. We have people from the States quite considerably. People from the States, for some reason, I don't know why, but they like the British accent. So
yes, they do, don't they? That's why I'm in this job, I think.
So you like the English accent or the British accent, Scotch, Irish, or whatever. And we get quite a lot of people from the States here. We get people from anybody anywhere who likes the idea of London as a concept will visit us to come and have a look, see what we've got, come and talk, come and find out what people who are part of London or the London ethos are like. So we're really creating sort of a brand of type, if you like. People say that we're friendly and we're helpful, and it's that kind of thing. And I think this is what's happening in virtual worlds these days.
I think there's similarities. It's not the same, but with like Ham Rambler in Dublin,
Absolutely.
it's people love the Irish bar, not because it's in Dublin, but because it's symbolic of a culture that is replicated all over, well, not all over the world, but many places in the world. The Irish bar, and things like that. And of course, on the London Sims, even in Second Life, I don't know how many bars have you got now. other than the Greyhound, there's
We've got,
an awful lot of bars with different
which
things
you just
happening.
look out of your window in real life and have a little wave to.
Yeah, you've got the virtual equivalent just about everywhere, which is wonderful in itself. Coming back to this, sorry.
Just quickly, for anybody who doesn't know, we've actually got Mal's house in London in Second Life.
Yeah, enough said about that, the better. I don't want them queuing up at the organic doorway. They do indeed. They do indeed. I even inhabited it for a short while. But, I think there's a new resident now. I expect there is. Good luck to them. If they want some interior decoration doing, I might give them some tips, but that's all. Right, I'm coming back to the presence idea, and also that thing I just mentioned to you, where Corrimal said there are no longer boundaries between tutor and pupil, and coming back to Phelan here, really. I mean, that presence is all about engagement and to a great extent collaboration. Once you have the presence and you acknowledge the presence of others, that's where collaboration begins and things. And you see it in places like Second Life all the while. Teams are built from people scattered all over around the world. They've got a common interest and they build together to do something, and one person may have certain expertise, another person may have another expertise, and sort of it all comes together. And in the what you might call the traditional educational thread of things, we're very used to the idea of teachers being in front of a classroom or some similar sort of thing, and also sort of passing the message down, passing knowledge on. I've done this from time to time, and my job there is to sort of just tell them the stuff I know and pass that knowledge on. And you keep an eye on what people are doing, and I'm really talking about corporate training here, but and you know a bit about their why they're there and what their company does, and you sort of look in and you adapt your mindset, as it were, to what they're seeking to get out of it, and you try and comment based on what they're seeking to get out of it, as opposed to the spiel you're giving the whole room. But I think what Virtuals has done as an extension of this presence thing is it's been a bit of hasn't it been a bit of an equalizer between the teacher and the taught? As you say, teachers are now beginning to learn lessons from their kids, and as much as the kids are learning lessons from the teacher, and often the role of the teacher is almost a kind of coordinator and direction giver of knowledge, rather
Facilitator.
than
They call it a facilitator.
yeah,
Hmm.
thanks, Petlove. Well,
Yeah.
you can start this. It's becoming facilitation rather than just imparting knowledge. We touched on this when I was asking Phelan earlier, but is there going to be, Petlove, do come in here, by the way, but what do we feel generally? Is there going to be a leveling of the idea of the teacher and the student to the point where the teacher will be a kind of guide for students rather than the one imparting the knowledge, do you think?
Do you want the optimistic answer or do you want the pessimistic answer?
Well, you can give both, but let's go with the optimistic one first, because that's actually...
All right, so let's start with the optimistic one. So the optimistic one is, I think as we start to understand more about the relationship between social structures and peer-to-peer relationships and the idea of knowledge and information, that you're actually going to see more and varied types of these types of peer relationships, because and the way Deb put it in terms of a ladder, this is actually sort of the way we're thinking about it as part of Rockcliffe, is this idea that as you start to gain more and more knowledge inside a particular field, wherever you're at, there's going to be a particular percentage of people who are going to know either a little bit more than you or a lot more than you, and there'll be a particular percentage that will know either a little bit less than you or a lot less than you. And it's essentially, it's sort of similar to a very normal distribution curve if you remember back from your statistics. So when you start talking about these peer relationships, really you're talking about people who are you're talking about people who are maybe way ahead of you. being able to act as a mentor to where you are inside your knowledge development and your how you're processing information, and helping guide you up to try to get closer to their level. Right. At the same time, these types of environments also give the opportunity that the student also becomes a mentor to people who are below them in terms of how much knowledge that they have. Um, it's to a certain extent, and sorry, I'm just trying to wrap my head around this because it's a concept I want to get out here, and
It reminds
I've
it,
got to.
it
I'm afraid
reminds
I'm going to mess it up.
it reminds me of a sort of pyramid structure where, in any given situation, somebody is at the top of the pyramid. I don't mean they're the great god overlord or something, but they are the one with the best knowledge given a particular situation, and that levels down from that, where the person on top can, can impart their knowledge to
There
those
are
immediately below. And
always those levels in any
yeah,
area of
Can I
expertise.
interject?
You know,
yeah,
I've got a
Debs.
spiral as an analogy.
Well,
Each one, spiraling up. Everybody's spiraling upwards.
right. Well, it's interesting because there's a group called the AACE, which is the Association for the Advancement of Computing in Education, and they put on 3 or 4 real world conferences per year, and they get somewhere between 700 and 1,200 people that show up to these particular conferences. And for a while there, I was going to these things every single year. And it was interesting because as I was going to these particular conferences, you'd walk into conferences that were you'd see this really great title, and you'd have this somebody has done a really wonderful abstract, and you're thinking, I really got to go to see this. And you walk through the door and you're all set for this really engaging presentation, and you're thinking by somebody who has more knowledge than you do. And what they're doing is they're standing up in there and saying, guess what? I found this environment called Second Life. I just discovered it over the summer, and this is what I learned. And it's sort of like, I don't need to be here. I'm sorry, but I'm out of here.
I love the fact, I kind of reflect to probably about a year after I created my account in Second Life that I sort of feel was like a golden age. I mean, a lot of it had to do with the connections I made then and what was happening then. People who now aren't in Second Life, others who still are, others who've moved on but have moved on to equally exciting similar things. And but it amazes me, when I keep reading blogs day after day, posted somewhere, they come to my search engines and they're posted willy-nilly all over the place. And, there's, a good supply still of those blogs saying, I've discovered this thing called Second Life and it is, whoa, rather down the line, but.
Right.
Makes you feel old, doesn't it, in terms of knowledge?
Well, sort of, because I mean, here's the thing, and this is what I'm referring to as the difference between the optimistic answer and the pessimistic answer. I mean, when everybody, if you go back to 2007, 2008, the knowledge gap between the people at the top end of the knowledge curve, so to speak, and the bottom end was really narrow. Right. I mean, there wasn't a lot of difference between those people who had been in for a couple of years and those people who were just coming in. So there was a lot of opportunity for people of various different backgrounds to mix and match, and the number of opportunities to get into some really interesting discussions, cross-populating knowledge across different subject areas was incredible. But as we've been going along, the knowledge gap between the top end and the bottom end has been getting larger, so that more new people that are coming in have less an opportunity to talk to those people at the upper echelons of knowledge than they had back in 2008. So when I'm talking about the optimistic and the pessimistic view, the optimistic view says that somewhere along the line, we will figure out a way that it doesn't matter how big that gulf becomes between the people at the bottom and the people at the top, that we will manage to find a way to continue that dialogue as we move forward as a society or as a group. The pessimistic view from me, however, is that once you reach a certain state, once that gap gets to a certain size, that there's no going back. I mean, it's just sort of the nature of those who have want to develop more, and those that don't are just
I
you
think
tend not to want to deal with those types of people.
I think it's, I mean, a good parallel probably is big corporations, who've been pioneers, technological pioneers, maybe at the beginning, maybe only a decade ago, who are now so big and cumbersome that they've become bureaucracies and they're stumbling over themselves trying to
That's largely the
innovate.
American education system. I mean, it's
Mm,
so antiquated. Some areas of light are bursting through. I mean, it's obvious that learning and teaching are evolving along with technology and society.
mm,
And it's bound to happen, and it's always happened that way. It's just a hard shell to break in many instances because of money and attitudes,
mm.
blah blah blah. But teaching and learning is really a wonderful thing.
Now
Kwamio, hmm,
you are a former teacher anyway, aren't you?
I
And
am.
where I was going to come to you anyway because when I mentioned that pyramid thing, you came in and you said all things kind of like this, and
There are
I think
different levels of
we we
expertise or
we
ability.
sort of,
Yeah.
yeah, we sort of cut you off on that
Oh,
thread
not at all. I
because
was interrupting.
well, no, I'm quite interested. I mean, we've clearly got an educational thread going here, so I'm quite interested in your perspective, on this as well.
I'm just sitting here nodding my head. I mean, I taught middle school aged students for a pretty long time, and I learned things from them on a regular basis, and what they learned from me was often academic, but it was often also, it was just social, it was emotional. I mean, it's not a simple cut and dry process the way people want to put it into a box. It's a
Yeah,
very
sure.
interactive experience for everybody, and I think it's great that virtual worlds can foster an even further expansion, facilitate the further expansion of new ways for us all to learn. It's just a shame
Mm.
that the percentage of people who do access virtual worlds for education is so small. Um, but it's growing, so
Do
that's a
you
good thing.
think? Do you think? Well, we're looking back here, but I often come across people. I can think of two people, personal friends of mine in the organic life, so to speak, who are totally adverse to. I think they're scared
Could be.
of, they see the level of immersion, and as you say, they get a sense of that presence, and they just want to back out
It's like
immediately. Oh, God, no.
snowflakes. Everybody has a different attitude, a different experience, and this
Mm,
is new, and you're going to get a lot of naysayers, but there will still be progress,
yeah,
regardless.
I think, can I just butt in here?
yeah, sure,
Yeah.
I
Debs.
think for some people is, we are immersed. We, however much we say we might not be. Right, I'm sitting at the desk. We are immersed, but some people, they do not get that immersion engagement,
That's true because they have a totally
and
different experience. Yeah.
yeah, they have a
hmm
different experience. They just don't seem to manage to.
Catch on to
Um,
the joy of it, the extended
you could put it that
possibilities.
way.
You know
Well, I
what I
think
mean? Yeah.
it'd be interesting while we're here. We sort of touched on this last week, but we're a new group here this week, so it'd be interesting to hear your opinions on this. Rather than looking back on 2013, and I almost think it's worth looking back on a decade of public virtual worlds. It was Second Life's 10th birthday, for example. That is a
hmm
decade,
hmm
and the changes that have happened long term there. Now, halfway through that decade, a lot of us were still here banging our, being metaverse evangelists or whatever, and we're actually promoting immersion because that was what it's about. We saw the potential of
hmm
this presence and this immersion. Now, for one reason or another, there's been a huge rise in mobile technology, and now they're bringing in wearable technology. And what seems to have happened is the message that said, instead of going to web pages, go to places and engage and slow down. Because of all these mobile devices, what we tend to happen is people are consuming information and communicating in short bursts. They're not really learning anything. Everything's transmitted as a quick headline or a quick
Right.
message to somebody, and not only does the mobile technology sort of latch on to that, but it means people are actually, I feel, not really learning so much
They're
because
not
they
practicing
don't,
that extensive attention,
yeah, they don't
not
read a
putting
whole
the time
article.
in. Hmm.
Even I don't read whole articles half the time. I read the headline and only read the article if the headline's interesting, and sometimes I only read half the article. So even I'm guilty, but not
And you have
too.
no way of knowing whether the headline is misleading or not. You know, you
Well,
totally miss what you might have
I
learned.
yeah, but
Maybe.
I have to see that, I'm I'm as passionate about virtual worlds as ever. They are a future. It's really a matter of when they make the public breakthrough. It may be particular
Mm.
exhibitions or particular types of games like this,
Critical mass.
Even
like
the idea of
Jane or
breakthrough, though, there's,
yeah.
you see, I think that's unrealistic, and what I see it as a lot of people not really understanding what a slow and involved process this type of change is going to be. I mean, it's relatively
Yeah.
fast, but breakthrough. You know, we expect things to happen quickly these days. We've sort of been taught, and brainwashed almost, at least in the States, by the TV I watch. You know, everything is pretty cut and dry, and nothing is too
Yeah.
important.
It's
Um,
becoming it's the same here
and
now,
it's
I
a
think.
shame, yeah.
What-
But
But
people still muddle through.
yeah, I would say my main concern. Oh, I think we've lost Phelan. So
Oh, yep.
I'm sure he's still on voice, but I think the
Hi, Phelan.
famous Avatar disappearance.
Oh, did it disappear?
Yeah, yeah, it's the usual
See,
Second
that's
Life
a
problem.
very specialized skill that nobody understands except for people in Second Life. It takes a
Yeah,
lot of talent and understanding to be able to crash gracefully and come back.
and not and
And we
not
learn that.
and nobody notices until we
Well,
remind them.
actually,
This is
there,
true. This is true.
yeah.
No, it's an important factor in my thinking these days about interfacing more than anything else. The idea of getting onto the web and the other parts of the internet via TVs, but we're lumbered with these clunky interfaces that look like Windows 8 actually, but I mean they're clunky however you look at them. Um, but the thing is, we're moving into this kind of ridiculous short burst news, short burst communication society. Everybody IMs rather than emails, me included. Everybody scans what everybody else is talking about rather than sit down and read articles and things. And to me, even if I say to somebody who maybe 10 years ago would have been fascinated by the immersion and the presence and the things we can do in somewhere like Second Life, it's a harder task to convince them now because they're moving into this short burst mentality. And the
Mm,
idea that I say to somebody, "Come and join us for a concert in Second Life and publish a slow," even if they got a Second Life account, they think, "Oh bloody hell, that's going to take me an hour." I've got to go in and, I just want to watch a 2-minute video clip, please.
yeah, yeah.
So it does actually worry me that this immediacy of communication and our consumption of, if you like, news is increasingly consumption and not
I think
involvement.
Philip Linden last year at some point said that one of the things that holds the general public um, holds them back from really embracing virtual worlds are the technological difficulties. Like, not everybody has a computer, not everybody has a strong enough computer,
Mm.
and he said when those things are conquered, he was talking about the cloud at that time. I don't know where that's at now, but he expected that to facilitate the whole process to a point where it might be a lot easier for a lot more people. So there's
I
always
think I
that
think
too.
I think he
Hmm.
was right. I mean, I'm
Hmm.
I'm assuming that the iPad version, when it actually is public this year, if it happens, is going to be lightweight enough that you're going to be able to just launch it, do a thing, and then hide it away while you continue with something else. That tends to be the way apps on pads work. Um, and that is a lightweight thing, but that really is only the entry point. I mean, it will help a lot if somebody can click a web link and instantly be in the app or inside Second Life on their desktop at speed. But I think the other task, even with that in place, would be to convince people that it's worth hanging around to actually take time out and have an hour's relaxation or have an hour's involvement in something. And just for an hour, get away from that instant,
Right.
endless
Hmm.
engagement
Hmm.
with Facebook
Well,
or something.
Mal, look at us now. You know,
Brilliant.
We're here. We've got people in the audience here. They're making comment. They're contributing.
Mm.
This is a long-term thing. It's not a 5-second snip and out.
Oh
That's
no.
right.
So there's well, global participation in this program here now.
Oh, for sure. Well, it's
Yeah.
wonderful. I thank all our viewers and
Yes, thank you.
chat contributors too. I mean, this is a future. It's just that think one of the great things apart from the presence and everything else about virtual worlds to me initially was, yay, we can have virtual meetings. We don't need to use cars and aeroplanes anymore. We can help the environment with this technology. But
Trying to convince people is a
yeah.
nightmare. I'm trying to do it all the time. It's one of my goals in life is to I'm very much into the I don't know if you've heard about it, but the you probably haven't heard of it, the Thrive movement.
What's that?
No.
Which is on about Thrive, yes.
Mhm.
It's on about, it's basically about sustainability. I mean, we're in, we're currently living in a capitalist society whereby it is a pyramid scheme, whereby ultimately, wherever that ultimate end ends, it will end.
Yeah.
The rich are getting richer, the poor are getting poorer. You're looking back in history, you can see that every time this has happened, there's been problems.
The bottom of the pyramid is basically sinking into the sea and drowning. And of course, at the end of the day, that destroys the economic structure of the pyramid. So you're quite
Exactly.
right. Yeah.
Yeah. So there's a lot going on. And a lot of it is to do with sustainability of societies,
Right.
sustainability
Mhm.
of nature,
planet.
sustainability of communities. Yeah, and did you know that you can only have 5 people close to you?
Really? And without
The
impacting the
Dunbar's numbers.
environment in a negative
Yeah,
way?
Mm.
No, I didn't
Dunbar's
know that.
numbers.
Mm.
It's worth studying. And then if we all sort of worked in little sort of groups of 5, and other people work in groups of 5, and it's
Well,
you know,
yeah, it's far more manageable. If I'm on it with a team, I love working with teams, but there is
yeah,
a size where there's too
exactly,
many and a size too much. And
exactly.
the great thing, though, is that it's like the 6 degrees of separation almost doesn't
Yeah,
exist anymore
no,
if you put your mind to it. So it's really a matter of you should better find more efficient teams and more
yes,
teams you connect with because you've got that global directory of contacts, if not friends,
exactly.
available
Yeah.
to you, so you can pull in the right. Well, like today, there's 5 of us on the stage.
Yeah.
Isn't that
So
odd?
that is why this show is so absolutely perfect.
Serendipity.
We always have the 6th seat is always empty.
Very
Maybe there's a reason
symbolic.
for that.
There is. I mean, it's interesting though. I mean, you mentioned that. I guess one of the things that I'm thinking about is that while we've come a long way, I mean, we've also completely and totally dropped the ball on this particular environment. And I hate to say it, but I really sort of do point the finger at Linden Lab for doing this because here it is. In 2008, some Yahoo in the board of directors of Linden Lab decided, ooh, hey, maybe we're going to start believing our own hype and let's go and we'll try to make sell this to big business when the platform just simply was not ready.
Yeah.
And all of the innovations that we really need inside this environment to really make this truly cutting edge and to enable the type of collaborative type of learning and exchange that we really need here. But we're 2014. We have now lost 6 years of development time where we can't, I can't drag and drop a file from my desktop into the virtual world and ta-da, there's my PowerPoint presentation. No, I have to save the stupid thing as a pile of images, import them, try to see if I can find a viewer, and then hope to hell nobody's going to click on the damn thing as I'm halfway through my
Totally
presentation.
Does that work in
I mean,
Unity? Can you do that with Unity?
different.
No,
I
you
was
can't do that
hoping.
with Unity.
No.
There are some what I would really broadly describe as metaverse platforms where that is possible. I mean, there's
Open Wonderland.
yeah, and
Yeah.
also I
Wow.
think that there's one called Sakoko, which you may have come across.
Yeah.
It's you basically it's not a 3D environment, but you get a floor plan and there's a dot showing where you are. and you can move around from room to
Can you
room on
dress
the
the
floor.
dot? Can the dot
No,
shop?
it's
No,
horrible.
no. It's a purely functional business
Sorry.
environment.
It's a
But
Pac-Man character.
But
smart.
what you can do is you can go into a room where a presentation is taking place, and you can click from an aerial floor plan view on a media panel, which will show you the presentation that somebody is giving. And if I recall rightly, that can be operated. The person giving the presentation there, for example, can literally drag and drop into the Sococo window the presentation they want to show. But it's a very different platform. It's not a 3D web, and it's also
It is, but I mean, it's amazing how many of these things are so pervasive in terms of academic and in terms of business. I mean, just being able to, like, let's just start with PowerPoint presentation, which I know every educator hates and loves at the same time, but this whole concept in terms of, I am the moderator for a classroom. And so I need to have control over what it is that is being displayed to the audience or to the students. I can't do that within Second Life. I can put stuff up onto a screen. I might be able to manipulate some of the images, but if I do anything with web on a prim, as soon as I start going out to the cloud, so to speak, then all of a sudden every individual has their own option to turn that on or off. And I now, as the moderator, I now lose complete control over the environment. And they did that for some very valid reasons with regards to ensuring that people were not going to have their systems corrupted based upon bad HTML pages or receiving viruses and what have you. But at the same time, this is not what we do in the real world. In the real world, when your director, your DG, or your CEO comes in and says, "I'm going to talk to you," right? You don't have the option to turn him or her off, right? It's like
It's not a
you're in the room.
negotiation, yeah.
It's not, and yet those are the types of things that we really need in here. We need the ability in order to have moderator controls over who's doing what in the way of voice. We need moderator controls over the presentation of materials and to be able to control other people's, viewing experience based upon what it is that we're trying to get across. That's the way it works in the real world. And there's an expectation that you should be able to do those types of things here. In WebEx, it's a given. You can do all of those things, right? But not inside a virtual environment. And so the ball really did get dropped because there's like about 2 to 3 dozen of these types of innovations that need to happen. That's just one example.
And that's the dinosaur of education that we were just talking about, because the teaching and learning model is slowly changing. And instead of one director leading the class the way 99% of places do it, what you're talking about, Phelan, the director will facilitate groups of people to set off and reach certain goals. And how they do it is up to them, as opposed to the control. And that would work in here. It works in real life too.
Yeah, I mean,
but it's a dream because it's not the way the world really works in education at this point.
Well,
Much.
Well, you have to look at these things as being tools, and are you using the right tool for the right reason? And the whole reason why people hate, while there's this love-hate relationship with things like PowerPoint, is because it's used so often as a crutch when really there are better mechanisms that could be used, including things like simulations, including things like practical hands-on activities that would get the point across in far more comprehensive terms to the people that are trying to learn and to relate to these knowledge concepts.
Mm-hmm.
I totally agree. I am one of these people that I don't think I've ever made a PowerPoint, but I certainly am bored to tears with them when I see them. It seems like there should be something a lot better and easier, especially to do in World. But I always had, going back that 5 years or something, I remember when Microsoft were in here for a while, and I think it was at Metanomics. I asked one of their sellers guests from Microsoft, how long before you bring a Windows desktop that's actually a virtual world? And they said, "Oh, it might happen one day," but and I've always been intrigued. For example, I mean, technically, I can do it now. I can have a private open sim on my own computer, which will be load with my desktop. I can have a section of that sim that's on the hypergrid. Then I can connect inwards. And but the idea to me was always that my desktop could be a room or a virtual world in itself, and that the objects and the links and things I put on items in that would react with my operating system. For example, I would click on a bookshelf to access my PDF library, or I would click on the TV to access TV, but my whole desktop would be a room metaphor. And I could go out of an entrance in that room
Yeah.
and enter the hypergrid, and then I could go, and from there I could go anywhere I wanted. That was my sort of dream. But you
Well,
put a finger on it neatly, actually, when you well, sorry, interrupt. Sorry.
well, I was about to sort of agree with you here because I mean, and I've been saying this for years, is that one of the most logical extensions to what we're doing, especially with things like Second Life, is extension of this environment into the realm of not only the operating systems, but also the way we work with applications.
Hmm.
I mean, if you took something like Adobe Photoshop and instead of going into this bland icon keyboard shortcut driven monstrosity that we have to work with now, if you could actually work into, like, walk into Da Vinci's personal workspace, and
Yeah.
you've got your paints and your
Yes.
brushes and everything is laid out within a 3D space the way you would if you could create your dream environment in order to work with all of these particular things.
Hmm.
Wouldn't that be far more natural than to have to go through and say, okay, well, now I need to do Control Alt Star click mouse
Yeah.
click Apple something or
And
other in order to get this
I,
obsolete thing that
I totally agree. And it's like when you view in-world media in Second Life. If it's set up right, you can click on the screen and it expands and takes over your screen. So you might as well be on the web page, but you've got a nice full screen view. If I click on a canvas in a virtual room and it opens up the canvas with my ready-made tools, I think that's a great idea. But it's the same way that a lot of virtual world conferences of various sorts and other, including educational ones, have always, indeed, for the show, we sit on seats because it's a familiar metaphor. However strange the environment is, the fact that we're sitting on the seat is something that people can relate to. We don't need to be sitting. We can attend a conference and keep standing because it's not hurting our organic legs. But we use the metaphors for familiarity, and what you're saying about the Da Vinci Studio is perfect. You know, you would walk into an environment that's dedicated to what you want to do at a given time, and it would feel like the right place, the right metaphor for doing those things, rather than. But you also mentioned something else, Phelan, and that was um, these are tools, and I think that metaphor. Well, it's not a metaphor; it's a fact. That extends to not only our desktops but our actual computers themselves. It is an enhanced toolbox. It shouldn't be a dependency thing. We've invented incredible tools in the modern age that are tools that we can work with. They're not things in their own right, so to speak. And Second Life is just another, and OpenSims and whatever. These are just other tools we've got. But when it comes to the visual metaphors and things, they are, the Da Vinci Workshop idea is, really compelling, I think. Other people suck. We're really going on here, aren't we?
Well, it's an interesting subject, really. To look at how the growth is, and I think you're right, Mal. These are tools. I mean, it's a very basic thing to call them, really. A spade's a tool, a
Yeah.
shovel's a tool, but
So,
these
so
have purposes for our growth. I think for mental development, mentally build,
see, it
and
would be
communicating.
yeah.
it would be really cool if London Lab had spent the last 6 years, instead of developing some of these little asinine little things that they've been, and I don't get me wrong, I mean, they, at least they've been putting some work into the Second Life platform, but you know being able to provide educators and business users with the opportunity in order to actually do proper gaming And I'm not talking about these little munchkin things that are, these Pac-Man lookalike simulation things that they got running around that my 8-year-old will get bored of within 5 minutes. But
Yeah.
I mean, the idea to really put some intelligence behind having non-role playing characters and being able to develop scenes and to develop, not just a space, but also being able to populate it with characters that have some reasonable
Yes.
intelligence into them. That's one of the core things that we could really use, because I mean, now all of a sudden, now we're not just playing with, how do you take Word and move it from my desktop into a virtual environment? But now you're basically saying, how do I take processes and how do I bring those in here such that I can show my chemistry students, how does the or sorry, my geology students, how does the water cycle actually work?
Hmm.
And being able to
Wouldn't that be
have,
fantastic to have them
Wait.
experiencing that?
well,
Well,
and to
there
be
is.
able to
Make
have
them
the
build
tools to
it.
put that together
Grade 'em on it.
quickly rather than
There
having
is.
to.
There is I think it's in Second Life. There is actually a build which is a fully functioning waterworks.
And
Actually,
do you know how
it's
long
great.
it took them to put that together? That's not
How
a
long?
simple project to
Yeah.
well, I'm not really. All right, so sorry, let me that was a little bit of a rhetorical question, but I mean, basically anything which is highly dynamic with inside this environment takes a long time to do, because you've got to get your graphics people in place, you've got get your prim and your mesh people in place, you've got to get your programmers in place, and then you've got to pull it all together. And there are no tools to do this. You have to do this brute force, line by line by line by line. Whereas, if you look at a lot of other things that we're used to working with, for things like creating music and what have you, we're into third, fourth, fifth generation software where the plugins and the tools and everything else are there to do these menial things for you that get in the way of the creative and the innovative process.
I
And Linden Lab stopped being, as soon as they stopped being a lab, they dropped the ball on this and on everybody
Yeah.
in terms of where this could be going.
I think from the beginning.
Can I get a word in
Oh,
here? I've
yeah,
sort of been sitting
Tara.
listening
Yes.
for a while.
Tara's been
Because-
quiet for a while.
Yeah, because I
Yes.
kind of want to respond to that. I'm going to play devil's advocate for a moment. And that is, I think that you kind of have to backtrack a few years to Linden Labs basically abandoning trying to go after the business market and the education markets.
Mhm.
And when they made that step, then the importance of being able to do PowerPoint presentations in World, for example, as a classic example, falls off the list. It falls off the wish list because somebody who's using Second Life as a social platform could care less about doing PowerPoint.
And that's
in
where they
Second
lost
Life.
their focus,
Sure.
because Second Life
Yeah,
strength has
and-
always been their social,
Yeah.
things happen that way. Sorry, Tara. Hmm.
Yeah. So, well, I guess my point is that I think Linden Lab made some decisions based on their interpretations of their results at the time of their penetration of education and their failure as far as getting traction in the business community.
And yet they had one of the largest marketing forces in the world in the form of the people that had from education, from business, and from government who
Yeah.
had come into this thing and bought into it heart and soul.
Yep.
Yes.
That's
I'm
right.
not disagreeing with you on that. But I'm
They
Fine.
saying
shot
Right.
themselves in the foot so badly
But-
in the labs. It's a
but-
shame they
but-
haven't had intelligent management for
Yeah.
a while.
Linden Lab attempted outreach into the business world, and they clearly I think the people they hired probably did not have a clue about what they were trying to do.
And who does? It's a whole new world.
But
We can't
it's a-
totally
yes.
bash
Can I
Linden
just
Labs.
interrupt? I mean,
Yeah.
a couple of the marketing managers, I've known a couple of the marketing managers in the real world before, in other companies, and they've been top tier marketing managers. Now, and I've spoken to them personally about their role in Linden Lab,
Mhm.
and they said the parent, it was two of them actually, and they both said the same thing to me. How can I do marketing? How can I even find a target, find where the customers are when I've got no money? They were doing it on a shoestring. They had no marketing budget, zero.
Yep. Yep.
Mm.
Yeah,
Gotta have
that
you
that
do
certainly
have to
makes
have a
sense. Yeah.
budget. Hmm.
But well, you do, but when you've also got a huge, I mean, the education community inside Second Life represented at its peak, it's represented about 12% of the total market with inside Second Life. And
Hmm.
anybody that studies marketing will tell you if you own 10% or more of the market, you own the market. Period. End of story.
You're a
Right.
player.
And
Can I go back to
they,
another company then? What about
yeah,
Netscape? Does anybody remember Netscape?
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Oh yes.
Okay. I had a conversation with Netscape many, many years ago when they were the market leaders. And I said to them, well, what about this new thing coming up, this Microsoft Explorer thing? Oh, that's fine. We don't need to do any marketing. We'll just sit on the coattails. We've got the biggest market share. We'll sit on the coattails and we'll let them do the marketing for us. Guess
Uh-huh.
what?
2 years later, they were history.
yeah,
Yeah,
Yeah.
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 So we're
It
talking about the same thing here, really, Phelan. You know, it's just that they've got this wonderful group of advocates who basically they're not using as the kind of resource that they need to use it as. In fact, they're
Well,
upsetting you, aren't they?
well, I mean,
Yeah.
I mean, it's the unfortunate part is that the whether they could have or whether they couldn't have, the potential was lost as soon as they came in and they said, you know something, we don't need to have customer relations with these particular stakeholder groups.
Yeah.
And as soon as they got rid of all of their community liaison people, because they gutted that particular department, that
Hmm.
Oh
was it.
yeah, didn't they?
Any possibility of taking the potential, the marketing potential of the social network that was here evaporated as soon as they got rid of that particular group. The other thing, and I apologize. I realize that I'm just the one that's now turned this into a Linden Lab bashing session, and I really didn't mean to
Well,
do
Oh,
they
this.
made some
But
mistakes. We're not really bashing them. We're just
oh, they
talking about the
Yeah.
effect that they had. Yeah, and it
yeah.
was
Well, I mean,
sad.
it was because it was it was really interesting. I mean, to a certain extent, here it is. I've grown up inside. I haven't grown up in the education industry. I grew up in the IT industry.
Hmm.
And so, my background is government, Fortune 500, working with these particular types of organizations, building data centers and developing information systems, what have you. And, here it is, Linden Lab comes out with this Nebraska product, quote unquote. And as soon as I got information in terms of what Nebraska really was, I went back to them and I said, you've got to be joking.
What
There is
was
no
it?
possible way you could,
it
there
was
is
a
no,
server.
What was it? I
it's,
never heard of that.
It's a
well,
yeah.
physical server.
It,
Okay.
it 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 was, but it wasn't just a matter of being the server. I mean, people were sort of expecting that, um, when you're dealing with large data centers, I mean, the data centers want to own and control what's going on inside their own network. So here comes Linden Lab, and they say, we have this product called Nebraska, where you can run Second Life behind the firewall. By the way, we own the equipment. We reserve the right to have our people come in day or night in order to manage the software whenever or however
Yeah.
we choose to do it.
Yeah.
We want you to open up all the ports on the firewall.
Yeah.
And by the way, we're going to charge you an arm and a leg in order to do it. And I'm looking at
50,000
these
I
four
heard.
things and I'm sitting there going, there is no other company anywhere in the world. Even IBM doesn't do this, right?
No.
In terms of putting those particular types of stipulations on a Fortune 500 type company. They were going after that market segment
It was,
and they didn't understand the pricing model
yeah.
that
And the
that
Fortune
segment
500s are
is
so
used to.
upset about
I,
it now,
I
aren't they?
think IBM actually were one of the only few companies that actually bought one, and it was bought by R&D, of course. And,
Well, yeah, but IBM has always had IBM always had a special relationship with Linden Lab.
Yeah.
So I'm quite sure that all of these restrictions that Linden Lab put on there were not applicable to IBM. But you go to any government, you go to any place like that, and you say, here's our stuff. By the way, it's only going to do half of what it is you really need to do. And by the way, here's all the stipulations. Of course, the thing wasn't going to sell.
yeah. I think, it's neither Linden bashing nor promoting Linden's to say there's fairly common knowledge that basically when Linden Lab created Second Life, Philip principally, nobody really knew what it was going to be. And
Right.
I think,
Even
I
Philip.
think, I think even now, that's more the case than ever. They don't really understand what they've created. So we've had a Petlove and I filmed a session of virtual ability some time ago, it may have been in the last year, where Philip Rosedale, who founded Second Life, came in. I remember asking him, as I've asked him several times actually, but this was in public, what about the hypergrid, and he gave an on-air answer, very quickly dismissive. But he said two things: was that he was really enthusiastic about it and had tried to support it and open source some code and stuff, but he felt that the audience, well, it wasn't there. It couldn't become part of a mainstream strategy for Linden's. He was no longer CEO by then, but he was clearly speaking for. He was still chairman of the board, so he was speaking with authority, should we say? And I found that a bit disappointing because Linden's, for such a highly unique product and a creative product, despite the fact that I don't think they really understand what they built, they aren't seemingly deploying R&D in any way anymore. They have what has become a walled garden because of their refusal to operate with an open hypergrid and work on connectivity that way, which in the end form, not the short term, but in the long term, will be to their advantage because they will be a premium destination on a greater structure, just as popular websites are popular websites.
And do you remember?
But
Go ahead, sir.
yeah. Yeah, but there've been a succession of CEOs, and all the succession has taken place, post Philip, behind this walled garden. And I think the difficulty that Mark Kingdon faced when he was going after enterprise was how on earth do you sell a walled garden to enterprise? And what Phelan was saying about keeping it as your own product and controlling it defeats the object of offering it out. You might as well offer a business facility in Second Life. Times change, and the new CEO comes from a gaming background, so he's focusing on elements of the world that he knows and understands.
Absolutely.
But he is equally, probably not the right word, but misguided, because he only understands the parts of Second Life that relate to his previous experience. And the thing is, Second Life and the other virtual worlds are a completely new phenomenon. They need to interlink. They need to work together to promote the methodology of immersive spaces. And also, when you've got a walled garden governed by a CEO who doesn't fully understand the overview, I'm not saying it's easy to understand because, as I say, I don't think
Still
Linden's
evolving, yeah.
ever quite worked out what it is. But they're locking down all their channels for opening up. At the moment, they seem to be working on the idea that they will make their platform better and better and better. And eventually, there will be a high demand for this walled garden. But I don't personally believe that is the way the future will work. It has to, virtual worlds will have to interconnect if virtual worlds are going to be viable destinations online. And it has to be easy. And I don't think that, I think Philip understands this, but thinks it's too far ahead. It's too long term for, at the time, Linden Labs to pursue. Mark Kingdon was always quite excited about the hypergrid and OpenSim, but he never channeled any of that into his job as CEO.
It presents great business opportunities. Hypergriding is so good for business.
I think they missed it.
It would be a good tool.
Mark Kingdon did not channel it into his job as CEO of Linden Labs. He was just interested in it. And I imagine the same could be said for Robbie Linden. I'm sure he knows about OpenSims and all the other stuff going on. One thing he does have in his favor is he wants things to get faster and quicker, and something like the iPad client may well do the trick. But he's still, somebody with the game mentality, has worked in games for many years and created some of the landmark ones, like Will Wright on the board. They have a legacy, and their knowledge and the way they approach things over time is really flavored by that legacy. So, who knows? Second Life may have a new CEO in 2 years' time or something, who's got a completely different legacy and a completely different orientation. We really can't know, but I think Linden Labs, through in its history, looking back on the decade as we seem to be doing today, has created a sort of monolith that it doesn't really fully understand itself, and has constantly been falling into self-serving traps, whereas they could really gain traction by opening up the gates a bit more, so to speak.
Yeah. See, I would love to, and I realize I'm never going to get an offer, but I mean, I would love to take over as CEO of Linden Lab, because I think at this particular point in time, I still think there's a window of opportunity there. Their only saving grace at this particular point in time is that nobody else has taken advantage of this window of opportunity that they have allowed. And because nobody else has stepped up to the plate to really cover the gap between where we were in 2008 and where we are now, there's still a window of opportunity that Linden Lab could be extremely relevant to where all of this is developing into the future. But this whole current focus in terms of sort of I don't know
going
how
the
to
gaming
describe
route
it.
and beefing up the platform, hoping that somebody will take good advantage of it. If they don't see it, they're not going to do it. It's all about perspective, personal experience, exactly what we were saying earlier. You in charge of Linden Labs right now would open up doors that they wouldn't, and vice versa. And that's why it takes a village.
I would open up to areas that I don't think they've even necessarily considered, because I mean,
no, because they're kids.
No, they're not kids.
I know they're not, but they act like kids.
Well,
yes, they do.
More like spoiled brats sometimes.
Whatever. Now I'll bash them.
Now, there we go.
There you go.
But I mean, it's so interesting, because I mean, there's the opportunity for collaboration with other groups that are doing very cutting edge things inside the industry. You look at what people like the group CCP Games is doing over for EVE Online. You look at what Blizzard is doing. You look at some of the things that Google is doing. I mean, this isn't a question of basically saying Linden Lab has to be at the absolute top of the market. This is a matter of selecting strategic partners to expand the capability of the platform, and then opening up opportunities that I don't think they really realize that there are huge opportunities sitting just underneath the surface that have absolutely nothing to do with whether or not you sell a region to somebody.
Yeah, I mean, I both agree. But I also think that this is that window of opportunity for Linden Labs is, if they don't grab it soon, they would have lost it.
Look, Kitely's doing some really innovative things. I was just talking to the CEO of Kitely a couple of days ago, and they're doing some really innovative things. And their focus is not the virtual world platform. It's all the support. It's all the supporting architecture that goes along with it, and that's really where Linden Lab should have been spending some of their time. So Kitely is closing that gap, and if you give them another 2 or 3 years with Linden Lab not doing anything, I think you're going to find that in certain areas, Kitely is going to be, the top player in those particular spaces.
Well, I mean, you look at Kitely, and they interact with OpenSim and the hypergrid. Effectively, unless I'm very mistaken, for example. Now, one of the other things that happened during the year, we mentioned it last week, and we would certainly mention it this week, had Maria been here, was the huge OpenSim Developers Conference. Each of the 4 sims, each of the sim was tested, and thanks to an Intel server, was able to hold 200 avatars. So you could get 800 avatars potentially, but there never were that many, but onto 4 sims. Technical obstacles. It was when it came about, it was extremely well attended and was like the talk of the metaverse after, and extremely well organized by Avacon and the OpenSim group people. The groups that put it on. I mean, it couldn't have been more perfectly done. Little things, but basically it was perfect. And you suddenly became aware of not only the open sim communities, but also the hypergrid and how it's extending. And I look at not only Second Life as the walled garden, but I see things being implemented into the Second Life viewer that are so Second Life specific. It shows them going on a totally different path from what will have to be the OpenSim viewer.
Yeah.
So they're already there. It's not that they're not making that cooperative jump anymore. They're actually doing the kind of work that is forcing Open Simulator to go one way while Linden Labs go another way. And the whole underlying rulebook, the code, as it were, is becoming less and less compatible between the two. So
Well, it's the same with the Inworld, isn't it? They've just released, their sort of mesh is different from Second Life, so lots of them are going different directions.
I think this is a shame. I mean, Avination, for example, wants to be on the hypergrid, but they have reservations that the long road for Avination is to be on the hypergrid. Inworld tend to be following the Second Life model of the walled garden and don't really show any intention of interoperability, which I think is a shame because none of these. You look at the massive population of Second Life, but then you look at the massive population of people who use the web, and you can't see it. We're not even a mote of dust. No. For these platforms to be noticed, we've got to be more than a mote of dust. We've got to be an ever flickering spark.
And that goes back to what Phelan was talking about. We need to be easier to use. We need to have tools that people are accustomed to using. More people would pick it up, probably. If there was more of that, we'd be a clump of dust instead of a moat.
Yeah. And see, it's funny because I think
it's
one of the things that
programming languages, isn't it? Sorry, I was just saying it's like programming language.
Yeah.
In with the browsers, with the internet, I mean, you've got all sorts of stuff now. You've got Perl, you've got Java, you've got to put them all in. This is going to techie talk. You have to packet them all and wrap them all to make sure that they talk to each other. And now you've got Python coming in, and
that's the point.
It's quite a mess.
It's a mess, but at the same time, it's like Flash, which became ubiquitous for a long while. Exactly. You package these things. It's object-oriented program. You put the final object in an HTML container, so they do all talk to each other because you're going to a web page structure, an HTML. HTTP addressing system, and when you
they talk to each other until such time as you stick them in a Microsoft browser.
Oh yes, that can be a problem. Of course.
I have to say, I think
not only can, it is. And continues.
I think the way forward is and only can be OpenSim. If you think about the internet and how that grew, it grew by little pockets linking to each other.
Yeah.
And got bigger and bigger, and that's the only way forward.
Well, that's why I think that Linden Lab may have passed their window of opportunity, because I agree. That a system that is starting now with what the hypergrid is at the moment will be the kind of system that will eventually be used to deploy virtual worlds. FastSpark as well, which is little known because they work for customers now rather than a public platform. Uses the same technique. It's all about going to an address and being able to get to that address however you want. You can go via the web browser and load a viewer, or you can use a world browser and go to the same destination. But the methodology of getting to the destination is given to their client, and their client can exploit it here, there, and everywhere. But as an engaging public arena, the hypergrid part of the Open Simulator complex is, it's a prototype for the way forward, and it's not only open source; it's been contributing developers from all over the place. I mean, they wrote some code just before the OpenSim conference. I forget what it was for offhand, but it's a giant leap forward for the hypergrid. So, it's the Regent thing. Until mid-year this year, if you wanted to go from one end of the hypergrid to the other, you had to go through an intermediary portal because it can go more than I don't know, 40,000 meters or something. And somebody cracked the code that allows it to go the whole distance now. So you don't
Yeah.
need, you can do a hyper jump without pausing in a mid location. And
And that's progress, isn't it?
that sorted everything. You are now truly one jump away from everything. You don't have to worry about portals that take you to the upper level and lower levels and middle levels and stuff like that. You're one jump away. And that one thing is probably the most significant thing that happened to the hypergrid this year. And it was apparently just a few lines of code of somebody finally drilled down into the legacy code and found where to put it, and it was up in time for the conference. Magic.
Wonderful. But that's how it should be, isn't it, really? I mean, I think that this is an education, as always. I mean, education and military led the internet. It'll be education and military that decides where this goes.
And of course, we shouldn't be forgetting. I can never remember what it's called. J. Lilly works on it. It's the American military metaverse. It's got a nice name, and the public
Moses?
can go.
No.
what's it called?
Moses. Thank you, Petlove.
yes.
I knew it was on the tip of my tongue.
The government likes virtual worlds.
Yes, they do.
They're making smart usage of them to a degree. It's all right, I mean, I know the NSA loves
Let's talk
it.
about it.
Never mind. Just kidding.
Oh yeah, remember
Let's bash them too. No, I'm only
I'm
kidding.
reminded of that wonderful funny clip we opened with last
What was
week,
that?
well, basically it's a party in Second Life, and all the avatars were on voice, and sort of they were nattering along for a while, and they realised that all the people in the room were actually NSA agents.
Oh, is that the one that made the news and they were spying on themselves?
And they were
I
spying
didn't know about that.
Yeah, I mean, this
That was
is actually
embarrassing.
this is what really happened. But seeing it done as a machinima cartoon was just the end. It was just put so simply. They had no idea where to go, so they were spying on themselves. Oh, he looks suspicious. Well, of course he's suspicious.
Well, they were
He's one of
right.
your
They
colleagues.
found the most suspicious people on the grid themselves.
Yes, themselves. Yeah, lovely.
Oh, it's a
stuff.
book.
That I think is a very memorable takeaway from the year, actually.
Yeah.
But you're quite right. I've forgotten what brought us into that. I think we ought to start back.
Okay.
Debs, carry on. We're open-ended, don't worry.
I was just going to say about security and privacy. The NSA and the GCHQ are all over the internet and everything they're looking at. But actually, to get in, to find out what we're talking about and what we're doing in virtual worlds, they have to resort to sort of coming along and having a look.
I know. Like,
all they can,
objectively, just like, what's the value here? Use your heads. Be smart.
Yeah.
12%
Yeah.
could be yours again if you're smart.
I think a lot of lessons have been learned this year.
No, they didn't learn anything.
No. I think the
Okay,
public-
I'm sorry.
no,
I'll stop.
I think the public have learned lessons. I mean, but what I see is that we're on a road where privacy, as such, I think will be eradicated within a few generations. But
Yeah.
the challenge, I don't think, is to worry about that. The challenge is protecting human rights and social rights. Making sure that this ever-connected, totally connected world is not abused by people in positions of power, and that includes corporations as much as governments.
That's the Thrive movement.
Yeah, but I think the actual notion of privacy will slowly disappear from society, as time goes by. But the other thing that is apparent at the moment is that this mining is data mining. It is sifting through and spying on huge, colossal amounts of data. Now they can sniff for keywords, and they can sniff for recurrences of keywords, and they can flag people. And if they know who they flagged, they can then log into you and investigate you as an individual and tap you. But basically, there's probably needs 3 people, civil servants somewhere in the intelligence services, to operate a decent spying routine on one individual. So, unless 3/4 of the population are GCHQ and the other quarter of us are being spied on, the total Big Brother thing is not really possible, because it's all done at a data level. But they will have ways of targeting us and finding us from the data
They have
stream.
algorithms as well. They have
Yeah.
their smart algorithms. I mean, my husband's a data scientist, so
Yeah.
that kind of
Oh,
helps.
they have immense power, but
Yeah.
was it Pet who just said, the joke is they had to come in here to find us in the end, because
Yes.
no amount of that data sifting was,
Exactly.
when they wanted to target us, they've got to come in and have a look.
Make mistakes.
The data is the pointers which the intelligence services rely on to see what's going on here and what the trends are and who's involved. But you've got to send an undercover agent in if you really want to follow somebody. So there are saving graces to this as well. It's like I've never had credit cards. I don't mind the debit card and stuff like that. But I always wanted a plastic card that had everything to do with me on it. My national health number, my national insurance number, all the things that you need that seem to be held in different departments of governments and whatever. I wanted it all on a card, but I didn't want a card that had everything about me that could be snooped on by everybody. I just wanted
For yourself.
a means to carry all my information about and give it to whoever I wanted to give it to.
I think that's
Careful what you wish for.
well. I think that's really the crux of the issue. It's not a question of whether or not we do or we don't want to give up our privacy. I think it's more a question of what is the definition of abuse of the rights to access to that particular information, and that's I think really the crux of the question. I mean, when I go onto Google, there's times I go onto Google and I'll start looking up search terms, and maybe I'm spending a couple of hours playing World of Warcraft and I want to look something up, and all of a sudden Google says, he's looked at World of Warcraft before, so I'm going to give him these results. And it's sort of like, cool, something, the first result that comes up, that's the one that I'm looking for. But then maybe I'll go off and I'll start looking at things for dark energy or dark matter. I'll, get into some scientific type stuff. And all of a sudden I'm getting the same, dark matter in World of Warcraft. It's like, no. I'm actually looking for, texts on what is the definition of dark matter and what are quarks and what are we doing with string theory and where is all of this stuff going? And it's just because that's just the way my mind works. I'll go off on these different subjects for every once in a while. I'll get the totally wrong results, but occasionally they get it right. And we have these instances where we want to share our information. We don't mind the fact that maybe it's collecting other information, or maybe these groups are collecting other information, because 2/3 of the time they're actually giving us what it is that we want. We want somebody that's sort of looking after our interests for some of these things. But then you hear about things like the NSA and coming in and snooping on people, and it's a question of ultimately, in terms of your freedom,
that's the key.
You should have a choice. So they need to preserve our choice. There has to be a mechanism.
Phelan just said the magic word. To me, it's about freedom.
It's about,
if I take privacy out of the freedom equation, I'm worried about freedom, but I'm not.
If you're denied your privacy because somebody wants to target your advertising to you, that's my civil rights, and I resent that.
This is the crux. I mean, after 7-8 years of working as a consultant inside the government, the thing that I see time after time after time is it's not a question about what the rules are. It's a question about how the rules are interpreted. And quite often, if somebody inside a bureaucratic environment makes a decision that is going to impinge upon your freedoms, it doesn't matter what you think. They have the opportunity to twist the rules however they want.
And they do. It does matter what we think, but it's really, really going to be hard for us to influence them to be more reasonable. It takes a lot of effort, and it takes a lot of people, it takes a lot of money, it takes lawyers, because they do what they want. They run roughshod sometimes, and we've let them get to this point.
Yeah. We have to trust the people doing these things, and we don't have to trust.
No, we don't. No, they can just ask me if I mind, and if I say yes, then they cannot include me in their programs. It's that simple.
I was leading into a little gag.
Oh,
here.
sorry. This is my favorite rant these days.
Gag away, Mel.
It's not actually the trust of individuals or the organisations and things like that. But I would feel much more comfortable, if intelligent people who, are on top of the actual things they do are doing it.
Right.
I mean,
Mm-hmm.
I was going to make a joke to Phelan. I'll do the joke actually, because it wouldn't surprise me if a bureaucrat in the NSA thinks dark matter means the content of the dark web.
The underbelly.
The
Yeah.
underbelly could very
Yeah.
well be.
I've been wanting to
So
say that for an hour.
what protect? I don't feel comfortable that I've got protection against that bureaucrat who will misinterpret things and inhibit my freedoms by accident.
See, the problem is that
Or on
you've
purpose.
got two different parties that have very different agendas in terms of what they feel the rights are with regards to access to private information, the way those rules need to be interpreted, the abuse, the potential abuse, and the impacts on your freedom. And because you've got two different groups, one of which technically makes the rules, what you really sort of need is you need a third party that is completely and totally independent
Ombudsman.
to be able to go in and to basically say, NSA, I don't care what it is that you think you're doing with regards to, Snowbell and all these other things in terms of what's going on here, right? The rights of the individual within reason should be reasonably protected. And so long as the people who make the rules are also the ones that are allowed to interpret the rules, I think this is where we have this issue between the abuse of power and the limitation of individual freedoms.
Mm.
Even
Think
just the
bankers.
mismanagement of it. Just
It's it's a failure of democracy in a way. We the modern world, it doesn't. The so-called Western democracies don't feel democratic to me. We vote, and we have choices. We have a menu, but frequently those menus are a different flavor of the same dish. It's like me as a vegetarian going into a restaurant and finding everything on offer is meat. I've got a vast choice, but none of it's suitable for me. But when we elect people in a democracy, we're supposedly entrusting them with the fair administration of our society and our countries. We are not empowering them to do what the hell they want with us. That is not what we're doing. So, until we can trust governments and these kind of agencies to serve us instead of having us serve them or exploit us, then we have a very real problem. And unfortunately, it is the lobbyists and the corporations that now are behind the political campaigns that actually distort our view of what we're voting for. And we really just vote for more of the same, whatever we vote for half the time. And, I think we really do need to be concerned. I know there'll be a reaction to the NSA revelations and GCHQ and whatever.
it's already
But,
old news here.
It's sort of old news. And they'll say,
Nothing will happen.
They say, we'll fix that, but it will be a nice paint job. It will seem to fix it, but they'll carry on doing the same thing until they get caught out again. And, that's really sad. We need a real overhaul of what powers, those in powers that
Well,
we
that's
can
why what
exercise.
Debs was talking about, just 5 people around each other in a sustainable environment. It's real hard for 1 out of 5 people to control the other 4 people's advertising. Just kidding.
Yeah. Fair enough.
Yeah.
Ratcliffe. I mean,
Okay.
No, that is true. But we wouldn't. The group of the 5 of us wouldn't be here if it's not like the first 5 people who walked into the sim
Right.
get up on stage and hold a show and don't know anything about each other. It's all
It's contextual.
It's
as well.
yeah, it's got context.
Very
It's
true.
Broad,
Mhm.
It's being brought, and part of what I do is actually get a sense for what the mutuality of conversation can be. I could I could have spent the whole program talking about Inworld things coming up in the next week, like we often do. But the context of
We never do when I'm here.
yeah, well, no, the content. The
It's to your
context of
credit,
this the context of this program has shifted from a look back on the year to look back of a decade of virtual worlds, and so be it. Why not?
And the future as well, Mel.
Yeah.
We were talking about the future like you wanted to.
Yeah, for sure.
And I think we're all agreed that the only way to go is open sim.
Yes.
In some
I'm not
ways,
ag- I'm not agreed on
I'm not
that.
saying. I mean, I love aviation, I love equality and everything, and I do believe that eventually they will have well, I know they're working on the hypergridding portal,
Yeah.
so to enable that to happen. Um, you know,
I
so
I
Because it's a
I,
it
I
smart
has to be
thing to
open.
do.
yeah,
That's
I
a very
totally
Yeah,
smart
agree with
grid.
that.
exactly.
But
Hmm.
anything new I would do right now, anything that is productive, serious stuff, I would do on OpenSim for sure. We broadcast in Second Life because we've got ready-made HUDs for the cameras and situations, and it doesn't really matter where your
We could
studio is.
broadcast on any sim, Mal.
Indeed, we could.
HUD or no
We
HUD.
have done.
Yes, we
More to the
have.
point. Yeah.
Hmm.
Come and
Um,
broadcast on London one day, and
Happy to.
also Rockcliffe.
Okay.
I have a, well, it's not a duplicate studio, but I have another studio on OS Grid, which is hypergrid enabled, so we can do any program on
Oh,
Mal,
Grid.
your volume has really gone down. I'm not sure what just
Okay,
happened there. That's
okay,
better. Thank you.
I, I'll start the microphone in my nose for your delectation, Pet. Thank you.
Charming. Thank you so much.
I don't know why, but
Too much information.
Here's a
I've
tissue.
shifted. I've shifted the microphone for you anyway.
That's better.
Yeah.
Thanks. Yeah.
So yeah, I agree. I think for any serious purpose, OpenSim is what I do. I think it would be a long time before I would leave Second Life. However, because despite being a walled garden, there is a sense in which I describe Second Life as the high street of the metaverse. Just as I might open a virtual factory on OpenSim and open a conference center for private conferences on OpenSim, I might I might well still come to Second Life to open up the shop front, just a small shop front that is the public interface for what I do. But what I do will probably be on OpenSim. And
You can sell
that's the major.
TVs. You can sell media on a prim with a couple episodes of the show.
Yeah, exactly. The Second Life still has a function for me, but it is no longer the core of the metaverse as it will be. I think that's the best way I can put it.
Very well put. Very well put.
Right on.
So we've had a longish show, so I think we ought to start to wrap. I love the open-endedness. I could go on for 24 hours when I do this, but that is a real drain on both me and other people's time. Let's just have a quick. Maybe go around each other one by one. Anything we know of interest coming up in the next week, or coming weeks, or coming months, even. Also, by the way, I'll shortcut you on that, Phelan. We did announce last week and again today that best practices will be on April 9th for 4 days this year. I also haven't got it handy, but there is a closing date, isn't there, for submissions that I think it's about now?
It's not quite about now because we had a little bit of problems with the website, but the first call for proposals is going to close on January 19th.
Oh, right. So
Right. So we'll see where we are at that particular point in time, whether there will be a second call or not. But one of the challenges we had last year, and we asked people to beg our indulgence on this a little bit because we were in the process of completely rewriting the website, including completely custom code for submissions in the background of this. And so last year we were writing code at the same time that we were taking submissions. So the approvals, the acceptance letters didn't go out until very late in the game last year. So this year we have our first cutoff on July 19th, and the intention is that we're going to get the first round of submission approval letters out the door within a very short time frame after those come in and those get peer reviewed. So whether there will be a second call will depend upon how many submissions we get by the 19th.
All right. So
I'm guessing you meant the 19th of January, not the 19th of July.
No, the 19th of January. Yes, sorry.
Tara hasn't said very much this time. It's been the time when Tara hasn't said very much. Usually,
we'll come back to it.
Well, there has been, the four of you have been breaking in on each other so much. I just figured, I'll just sit in the background. You guys are doing great.
Oh well. So, folks, you've got literally 2 weeks to get your first round of submit. If you want to be part of Virtual World's Best Practice and want to do a presentation and want to submit it to Phelan, get it in the next couple of weeks. And
Do
is
we
it?
have the URL in the local chat
I
so
was
that we?
just going to say, I think it's vwbpe.org, isn't it, Phelan?
It is. Yep.
Yeah. So that's actually quite easy to remember. vwbpe.org, and get your submissions in there. Okay. As I said, anything else? I'll start with you, Debs. Anything else of interest coming up in the near future, or especially in the next week or so?
Well, I'm looking forward to presenting at VWP.
Yes,
But,
well,
well,
and actually,
There's a
times.
prize for being
Close
able to
your
sell
eyes.
that. Say that 5 times fast.
yeah, I know. It's like Peter Pecker Pickle.
We could VP.
Yeah.
What do you want to call it?
Yeah.
VWBE.
VWP.org. Isn't it?
I've been involved in this for years, and I'm just about getting the hang of pronouncing it. I still go wrong now and again. It's a bit of a tongue twister, but at least it's only 5 letters.
And just really come to London, see us in Avenation, see us in Second Life, come meet the people, see what we've got going on. And in OpenSim, I'm afraid we've got a closed environment in OpenSim, which is a bit bizarre, but.
Please, if you do go, please do not ask Debs to show you my house. I'd rather.
You realize, Mel, you're condemning yourself to a constant stream of
What house?
of looky-loos by making a statement. The quickest way to get people not to think about pink elephants is to tell them not to think about pink elephants.
It's very funny.
Mel has a pink elephant?
Chimera
Just kidding.
Cosmos. Chimera Cosmos in real life was here in London. I've met her a few times when she's been over here, but this was one time she was passing through and I didn't meet her, and she took one of these walking tours of London. And I saw a tweet while she was here saying, "Just past Mel Burns' house."
Oh no! Oh, by the way, Mel, global happy birthday, by the way.
Oh, thank you very much. Less said about that, the better, really.
How old are you
I'm on
now?
the London sightseeing tour, so that did it, didn't it? Okay, Petlove.
Yes.
Anything new exciting coming out this week or in the near future?
I have a list. Too bad I can't
Oh.
find it. The Hunties, the
Yes.
Happy Huntings Hunties will be taped this Friday and released next Friday. The first award presentations for People's Choice type hunt votes. Best category, best furniture, favorite skin, whatever. So we're kind of excited about that.
First time live for Happy Hunting on live stream, eh?
Yeah, as a matter of
Yeah.
fact. That's true. The LEA Art Sims you already talked about. I was going to just say how terrific it was of the LEA to open up those 17 Sims rather than let them sit idle. A special thanks to the new people working on that team who made that happen. That was pretty awesome. And that's probably about it. The first Live Glam, Miss Live Glam, their first fashion show and contest took place recently, and there will be a video of that in the next week or two. So, and I would like to put out a plea too. Sorry.
Yeah, please.
Okay. The 17 LEA Sims need to be filmed, and I would love to encourage anybody and everybody to make a film and either put it, and then share the URL with me or somebody with you, Mal, or somebody with a view.
Yeah.
If they share it with me, I'll volunteer to organize them somehow. But yeah, that would be nice.
Yeah, and if you do that, we'll be delighted to show them, as long as they meet our
Your standards,
quality,
your high
our quality
standards.
standards. So no interfaces showing and that sort of stuff, but make a good film.
Well,
And
that I
we'll
can't
no doubt-
guarantee.
Yeah, well, exactly. But make a good film. Fair chance we'll select it to run in our art section on the program here, which of course is all coming up in a minute anyway for this week. Okay, Phelan. We've covered everything about VWBPE at vwbpe.org. Just another reminder. Anything else on the agenda for coming weeks or whatever do you feel worthy of a mention?
With regards to Rockcliffe and such.
Rockcliffe, Second Life, just interesting events, maybe not even your own.
It's your moment to promote.
Mine to remote. No, it just we're going to be doing some new things at Rockcliffe. We're moving to. We're probably going to open up a Kitely location. So we're just sort of talking to the folks over there with regards to that, and beyond that, we'll have a pile of new things to show people at VWBPE. But so I'm going to just sort of stay mum on some of those for right at the moment.
Okay.
We do have a fundraising campaign though going right at the moment on Indiegogo, and so we are looking for help trying to get some funding together in order to go for IACET accreditation of some Rockcliffe courses.
Oh,
So that's going to cost us about $4,000 to $5,000 to do that, and we're hoping to get some funds through the door to help out with that.
great. So that's Indiegogo.com, I believe, isn't it?
Indiegogo. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I'm sure you can find details of that at
VWBPE.org. Yeah.
.org. You'll have the details there for the Indiegogo site as well.
VP.
Okay, that's so. Tara, same question to you, but I think let's go straight into a roundup of anything else you've got. Since we've deafened you all evening.
Well, I covered my news earlier, but I just wanted to reiterate our great thanks to Petlove for
Thank
her
you.
wonderful efforts on our behalf, on the show's behalf over the last 9, 10 months, 11 months that we've been broadcasting live from Inworld for a year. Yeah, it's hats off.
Well, hats off to you guys too, boy. I'll tell you what, it's been wonderful. Thank you.
And so, talking of hats off, we've lost a bunny.
Yeah.
Well, Christmas is over.
Yeah, I know. I'm just, I don't know. When you said hats off, I suddenly thought of it.
Yeah, I did. I changed my wig. When I changed my wig, I just threw a whole folder on. I forgot.
Yeah, no,
I kept it on forever as long as I remembered.
Yeah, no, I do that whenever I do a costume change. It's whatever's in the folder, and I forget the add-ons. I just remember the detaches, if they're unnecessary. Right. Well, we haven't talked a huge amount about in-world events this year, but being in a new year, it's all fresh and exciting. There are a lot of changes going on in background here and various places. We'll let you know as things progress. I do know from the blogs, if you check out huntsl.com, I believe it is, there are a load of new hunts, for example, starting up this week. Great way to engage yourself and immerse yourself in Second Life is to go hunting, often for lavishly great goods that you would otherwise pay a lot of money for, or not so much money, as the case may be. And art exhibitions galore opening. The new year is sort of a new season, so some of the LEA installations we've been mentioning are actually only for a month, as Corcus pointed out to me, basically filling a gap until the next full season starts. So you can look forward to loads of material promoting up and coming attractions there, I suspect, as well. So I'm just going to leave you with the usual farewell and good luck, folks. And I won't say see you next year because we're already in it, but we'll see you next week one way or another. I'd like to thank all my guests today. Petlove Petshop.
Just take myself off mute and say thank you very much. It was a pleasure.
Yay.
It's been a real pleasure.
Phelan Corrimal. Thank you, Phelan.
Thank you.
And Debs Regent, despite the underwelliness, thank you.
Thank you.
And of course, my thanks to Tara as always. So we will see you in the future sometime, like next week. Meanwhile, coming up, we've got loads of clips, the usual selection of new machinima, arts and music, performance, destinations, places and spaces, and various things on the lifestyle section that concludes the show. So if my Mary says to me, well, you've got about 3 hours of goodies coming up if you're watching us live. And if you're watching us in replay at YouTube or elsewhere, just check out nbtvlive.nu. And you'll be able to see the full show in replay and sort of pick and choose a bit what you want to watch as well, which is always helpful. So with that, it's goodbye for now and Happy New Year again.